Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah.
Dr. Ed Barnhart, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you. Luke, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to chat with you guys. Ed, why don't you introduce yourself and tell people who are listening a little bit about your background and how you discovered a lost city when you were 25 years old.
Well, okay. I'm an archaeologist, explorer, educator, and I've been at this for over 30 years now. I'm 56 this year. I got my start in archaeology I was a student in the University of Colorado at Boulder. Went to Honduras to go to the Maya site of Copan. There I met my future mentor, Linda Sheely, and I went to study with her for years, learning Maya hieroglyphs, and also from UT going out to do archaeology and survey in Belize. And that's where, at the age of 25, I found a Maya city. I used a topo map, kind of played the game of if I was a Maya, where in this huge region would I put a city? And I guessed right. So 2 years into the project, we actually found a bunch of pyramids around a plaza with a ball court and a palace and stela. So yeah, that was certainly a pivotal moment in my life. And since then, I taught for a little while after I got my master's and then my PhD, but where I really wanted to be was out back in the jungle and all those adventures. I didn't want to be teaching cultural anthropology to a bunch of people who were asleep in my classroom. So I ditched that and I started the Palenque Mapping Project, which became ultimately my dissertation. And then from there I created Maya Exploration Center, which is now over 20 years old. And Luke here is the latest member of Maya Exploration Center. And we kind of, in a almost rogue fashion, teach folks out in the field. We do field education tours. So we give lectures at night and we bring people actually through the ruins and teach them about it. And it's been great. For years now, I've traveled all over Mesoamerica and South America, teaching people, but also selfishly making it like I really want to go there. I'm going to make a trip and people can come and be involved in my research. And now I've done that for a number of years. I've gotten into this podcast world by creating a podcast. I actually, I didn't mean to make a podcast. It was COVID. My kids wanted to make a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, so I spent a week learning how to make podcasts, but by then they were over it. So I was like, well, damn, somebody's making a podcast in this house. I guess I'll do it.
So when you just first discovered that lost city, what was the name of it, and how did you sort of figure out where to look, or what did you use to guess where it would be, like where they would put it?
Well, I used everything that I had learned from Linda Sheely in my other classes as a graduate student, and I looked at this big area called Program for Belize. It was something like 200,000 acres that were given to Belize by Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola wanted to cut it all down and put an orange grove to create Orange Crush. Or is that theirs? Yeah, theirs is Crush. But anyway, this huge area was then a research place, and UT had a contract for 20 years to study it. Most of the things they were doing were right along the one and only dirt road through the middle of it. But I bought topo maps from not even the internet in those days. It was the early 90s, so I had to actually call people.
Yo, what's up, Colin? How are you, brother? Thanks, man.
And I said, okay, Maya,
I'm just trying to grow Meek's new fucking
and they oftentimes create them
strat.
in
Thanks, brother.
triadic forms, three temples staring at each other.
I think I got to.
So,
I'm just gonna
now,
practice
look
it
at
some
the
more.
map and try to first find the tallest
Thanks, brother.
mountain in this area. So I located that, and just as it happened to be, there were two other
I have
smaller mountains
53.
right next to it that made a triangle.
Blessedly.
And there
Or
were
what am I
three
doing?
rivers that were running in the middle of them, and I thought, that's it. If I was a Maya,
I just want to see how we do here.
and it was about 10 kilometers.
I like the
out
idea of
off the
using
road, so
cinema.
we had to just hack
It's
out
interesting.
there a little bit every day. And we found 4 or 5 villages along the way. But then finally I was crossing one
I
of
guess,
the smaller
yeah.
peaks on my way to the big
I also
peak,
have to
and
figure out when
that's
to
where the
change
city was on
strafe.
one of those 3 peaks. It was nice and flat, and that's where we found it.
And when's the last time you were down there, Lou?
10 days ago.
10 days ago.
Yeah.
Where were you exactly?
I was in Guatemala. So,
Okay. What were you doing?
So I was leading a tour for Maya Exploration Center. So we did. There's a few really well-known sites around the main Maya city of Tikal, but we led a tour there at Tikal, and then that was really amazing. I mean, Tikal it's a central city to the story of the Maya. Everything eventually through the height of the Classic period runs through Tikal. And then, so we led a tour out there, and then by the end of the tour, I did something I've been wanting to do for years, which was booked through him, got on a helicopter, and flew dozens of miles out into the middle of the Petén rainforest, which the Petén is, I think it's at least the second largest rainforest in the Americas, which is, it's second to the Amazon, but it's like 1/50th the size of the Amazon, but very, very remote. And it contains the largest pyramid definitely in the Maya world, and it's called La Danta. It's La Danta and El Tigre, and so that was really amazing. And one of the things that I was so interested about going there is because the head archaeologist at El Mirador, Richard Hansen, he refers to the architecture there, the stonework there. The phrase that he's kind of coined for.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, brother. You're the man, dude.
At the beginning of
I was lurking. I was watching your stream earlier. Fucking duping 24 like a boss, man.
Pyramids out of the biggest stones that they're ever going to make stones.
Just gotta add that train shot, and that's it. I mean, and a quick reaction to
3,000-year history
from the guards.
And what I was amazed by there is that the stone architecture is so much different than, as it said, so much different than anywhere else in the Maya world. But rather than taking these huge stones and laying them horizontally, they lay down the stones vertically and slide them in basically the least efficient way possible, but as far as managing the resources. But in reality, it was the most efficient way possible, because throughout most of the Maya world, when I went down last December, I took a 10 or 11 day expedition down into Quintana Roo of Mexico, landed in Cancun, went down to this ancient city called Calakmul, and I paid this local ranger a few $100s USD to take me out to this city that's, as far as he knew, didn't have a name, but I was able to find it later on. And it was this site I maybe covered a few hundred yards over the course of 4 to 5 hours. And just by the architecture, I was able to, I could tell what era the site was, that it was pre-classic. You can just tell when you walk up on top of a pyramid if it has a triadic. If it's a triadic structure, it's basically a pyramid with a platform at the top, and you have 3 more pyramids with the larger one in the back. It's pretty. That's iconic for the pre-classic period. Sure enough, I was able to do research later on, pre-classic structure, but that entire city, the smaller stones, as the trees grow into, as the trees and the vegetation of the jungle climbs up these pyramids, it grows into the structure and pulls the blocks apart, and eventually they look like mounds. And trying to take photos of these things, it's really hard to convey the size of structures, but in person you can see it. However, at El Mirador, even though the construction there was the least efficient way to do it in managing resources, it actually preserved most of these sites perfectly, because when they peel the layer of the vegetation off, the stones haven't moved at all.
I'm so
They're
rusty.
too big for the jungle to ever grow through them. Over the last.
Really?
Yeah. The stones there are just too big, too tight.
No.
I would say that they're as long as this table.
I gotta look down more.
And maybe 1.5 feet, 18 inches, 24 inches wide, and they're all slid into each other. And it's too monumental for the jungle to ever go through it. So this was something that it's like the primordial beginnings of the Maya world, and I've just been looking forward to seeing it for so long. I finally documented it. It was so hard to find great photos of this in person. So that's what I was doing 10 days ago.
That's incredible. I wonder how many pyramids do you think are undiscovered in that part of the world, in like Mesoamerica and South America? You guys have any idea?
I think I can conservatively say thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah.
How many do we know of?
That's it. Somebody like Luke should actually count them all
Because
up as best
Egypt,
we can.
know the number, right?
Yeah, it's like 140, 130.
Yeah. In Egypt, it seems to kind of vary because a lot of those smaller pyramids, they were quarried away to rebuild modern day Cairo. So the number kind of drifts between 125 to 140. And he and I were talking, the first trip I ever joined him on, we were in Palenque, and everywhere you would drive and everywhere you would walk, you can go to an area of Palenque where it's all cleared away and, and the grass is perfectly laid for all the tourists that are there, but he took us out into the outer ruins on the outside of the city, and everywhere you walk, it's these huge pyramids. And we were talking there, and he was like, the common term is that Egypt is the land of the pyramids.
Yo, Angel, what's up, brother? How are you,
This
buddy?
is the land of the pyramids.
APBs.
Certainly.
I guess recently we got Aztec, Aztec's secret agent
Probably over
139.
Part of the problem is how do we define
There's like a new looking strat,
Nobody
the
wants
gate
to say
skip
anything here in
on
North
emulator,
America.
and trying to get it, see if it works on
which
N64.
kind of, makes them inert. And so in the Maya area, does it have to be a pyramid type freestanding thing to be called a pyramid? How tall does it have to be? Is a 5 meter one a pyramid?
Are you, brother?
Or should we call it another kind of building? But if in the broadest definition of pyramid, I'd say
Protecting the
Palenque
nuclear
alone
plants.
Wow. What is the size of Palenque?
It's 200 hectares, about 2.5 kilometers across, and only a half.
It's late there, man. It's
wide.
like
It sits up on this plateau
1 a.m.
above the plains. So the mountains come up about 100 meters, a plateau of about half a kilometer wide is where the city is, and then the mountains continue to rise above them.
Steve, last time you were here, Luke, I think we looked at this, right? We looked at kind of like the whole geographical map.
We did. We looked at his map, and I told him that when you arrived there, you got the job because you had done you had found Belize, right?
Right.
And or I'm sorry, you had found
Mashna.
I'm sorry. He didn't find
We knew where
Belize.
Belize was. We knew where Belize was.
So he had got the job because he had discovered Mashna. And when he arrived, I was telling him that when you arrived at Palenque, there were maybe a few hundred buildings or a couple hundred buildings that were currently.
329.
Wow. And so you can take it from there.
But
Moved on from that. Wow, nice, buddy. Congrats, buddy.
And it's not the whole
I didn't know
city
that.
either. There's things. There's
Working
some
nice,
dispersed
man.
things on the hills above it. And
What are you doing now, if you don't mind? You don't have to dox yourself.
And somebody just showed me they just finally made a LiDAR of it. And about a half a kilometer to the east of where I stopped mapping is a really big pyramid. You can see it poking out clear as day in this new LiDAR. And I'm pissed I missed that one. I mean, little buildings is one thing. Little neighborhoods, okay, I'm doing my best. But I missed a whole dang pyramid.
How long did that take you to map out all that?
Better part of 3 years. It was crazy.
You lived down there the whole time?
Well, I come back for like 4 months to write up the report and give it to all of the authorities that would give me more money so I could go back down there.
Okay, is this it? This is
That's a version of it.
that's one version of it. Okay.
It's definitely the black parts are my map. The other parts are pretty more LiDAR, color-coded so you can see what's high and what's low.
And what civilization lived here?
The Maya.
This was Maya. Okay,
Right.
gotcha.
This is classic period Maya. These guys are kind of like the intellectuals.
Bits and
of
bobs.
Maya.
What does that mean?
The engineering here, the architecture's the best. Their
Sorry, man.
hieroglyphs are beautifully written.
I have no idea what that
The
means.
content is very complex. There's all sorts of astronomy tied into mythology that, like the guy who is buried in the big pyramid in the center there, the Temple of the Inscriptions, the one that square is over. He does this magnificent thing where he says he's better than the next lineage bloodline person. He's vaguely related to the people that were the kings before him. They got killed by an attack from Kalakmul, another competing city. But he says, I'm better than that. I'm the reborn avatar of the first of our triad of patron deities for the city. And he ties himself back to a place where Venus was rising in the exact same constellation. And at the distance is like 3,000 years. and he mathematically or astronomically dates back what the birth of that guy that we just call God One and Pakal were. He ties himself to the same rise of Venus and says, I am him reborn, and here's the astronomical proof, which is pretty dang complex for people that we think are somehow lesser than the other great civilizations.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was fascinating was in that in the Graham Hancock show, the episode that you were in, where you're explaining how they did the calendar and the different versions of the calendar. I love the holiday times with the family, but I find it very demanding to have to go to all these parties, dinners, and shopping for gifts. Every year I tend to burn out quicker than the last, but I don't plan on that happening this year. Getting older is inevitable, but feeling older is not. As we get older, our body's ability to create energy declines, but recent scientific discoveries have found we can actually increase our energy levels in ourselves by taking something called NMN. NMN has been shown to increase energy and endurance, activate our body's ability to burn fat, enhance mental function and health.
Oh wow, the
improve
fast
blood
gate.
pressure,
Holy
regulate
shit.
blood sugar levels, and support many other health markers. But finding high quality, pure NMN is difficult, which is why I use Versa. They conduct third-party
No.
testing for each batch
What's the
of products to
pause out?
guarantee you get exactly what you're paying for. It contains the highest quality
Interesting.
NMN and other research
Interesting.
ingredients that have been shown to increase energy levels and slow down aging. I take Cellbeing every morning, and I usually take it pre-workout. And after years of use, I've noticed I just feel like a younger version of me. I've noticed more energy, enhanced endurance, improved cognition, and I don't get sick as much. So click the link in the description or head on over to ver.so/Danny and use the coupon code Danny at checkout to save 15% on your first order. That's code DANNY at ver.so/Danny to save 15% on your first order. It's linked below. Now back to the show. And how they had individual names for each day for like 50 something years. That seems so confusing. I had to watch it back like 5 times to understand it.
You know, it really is confusing. I've been trying to figure it out for 30 years, and there's still things there are still aspects of the Maya calendar which confuse me.
And their math too, right? Like their numerical
shit.
system.
Oh yeah, you know
It wasn't more complex. It was simpler, right? There's only 3 characters. Is that right?
Well, I used the
I
word
fucked up the
elegant
stairs.
in that regard.
Wasn't
that
going to
they-
be 53 anyways, like
they have a
55.
positional system of numeration like we do, where we have, you know, the ones, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000, so on. They do it by 20s, but they only have 3 symbols. They have a bar, they have a dot, and they have a symbol for 0, which changes from a shell to a flower.
Right.
They can alternate. But we have 10 symbols. We have 1 through 9 and then 0.
Yes.
And we can write any number as big as we want approaching infinity. They can do the same thing, but it's really only 3 symbols. So in that regard, it's more elegant.
Yeah, but it's also
People
like
get pissed off when I say that their system was more sophisticated than ours. But so let's go with elegant.
yeah, well, it was more sophisticated though. Like the things they were able to calculate seemed kind of absurd compared to what we can do today, right? Like how is that responsible for these ideas of like different ages and periods of time, like these 52-year epochs that they came up with? Like how does that all tie together?
Oh, that's a very long answer.
We got plenty of time.
No, you know, we can see that their system begins with the foundation. First, they have a counting system, which they decide is 20, not 10. You know, that's one proof that they're not being overly influenced by the old world. I mean, why would they come up with a completely different base system? From there, they can count things, and they start using it to count primarily the days. I mean, we know they're counting all sorts of things, probably in the market as well, but we see them counting the days, and then they decide they want to make a year. They want to make a cycle that they can talk about one year to the next, but they don't pick the solar cycle at first. They pick a number 260. That's their sacred calendar. It's called the Solkeen or the Cholki, depending on whose language you're talking in. All of Mesoamerica does it, not just the Maya. It begins with the Maya or the Olmec, and then it goes everywhere in Mesoamerica until contact. So it's the most important month, but it's 260 days, no months, no weeks, just a combination of 20 symbols and 13 numbers. 20 times 13 is 260. Why that number? Why 260? Best we can reckon, and what the Maya themselves today continue to say, is that it's the gestation period of human. It's 9 months. So if you're impregnated on one ahau, chances are your baby will come out on the next one ahau. And I think it's beautiful that that instead of so many other cultures look to the heavens to make time, but they decided to look inside themselves. Like, what is a cycle that is uniquely just us? We look around the world. The sun's 365 days. Animals give birth on different time scales. We have this long, strange 9-month pregnancy. So they looked inside themselves, and from there they built out the 365-day calendar.
Right.
I think once they started to farm, that became a lot more important, knowing the solar cycle, when to plant, when to harvest. So those two numbers, a 365-day solar calendar and then their original 260-day calendar, when they put those two together like cogs spinning into each other, you're only going to hit the same day every 52 years. So for 52 years, you'll have a unique day. It'll have the first part of it will be its 260-day calendar name. The second part will be the 365-day calendar name. But because the two cogs, which they never made or envisioned, that's for Western minds to try to envision it, the two cycles only meet up again at the same number every 52 years. That's how we get 52 years.
Can you imagine how many generations it takes to do that? Like you have to have astronomers that are watching the stars daily, recording these things and then handing it down for generations.
Not for this part. One part's human and one part's just the sun.
Yeah.
These are the low-hanging fruit. The astronomy comes in when they make their next calendars.
Sure.
They make a lunar calendar.
The long count one?
The long count is the really weird one. And my friend Chris Powell did his dissertation or master's looking at that long count calendar and trying to figure out, is there an astronomical foundation? And really, as you go forward in it, all of the cycles of all the celestial objects they're looking at, the 5 planets and the moon and the sun, they just, the amount of synchronicities that happen in the long count are crazy. The farther you go up, well, even very early is the surprising part. You start getting these cycles that they're noticing, like the number 584. It keeps coming up and up and up. That's the synodic period of Venus. The number 780 is Mars, but that's 3 times 260. So that's a frustrating one to me. I can see the number 780, but I can never really say whether that's just 3 times the calendar or are they really looking at Mars. In the Dresden Codex, we have proof because it goes in a bunch of groups of 780 days, and the guy that we identify as what my teacher called the Mars Beastie is hanging off of a sky band. So it's really like a blatant, this is my number.
What is this? The Mars what?
There's a Mars. He's got kind of, he looks kind of dragon-like. He's got kind of a crocodile face with an upturned nose. But he shows up as the hieroglyph of Mars in a number of contexts. And in some of those contexts, it's not clear that he's Mars, but in the Dresden Codex, they make a whole almanac dedicated to Mars and showing it going 10 times in increments of 780 days.
Oh, wow.
Which is exactly...
Can you find this, Steve?
Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
Somewhere in the Dresden Codex.
See what this guy
Okay,
looks
so
like.
Google Dresden Codex Mars.
Dresden Codex Mars. You think we'll find a picture?
Probably.
Any luck, Steve?
Anyway, the long count's weird.
Yeah.
Because it's their linear count of days. And they're really not linear people. They think in cycles.
Oh, right.
Here's it. There
that
he is.
him
There
on
he
the
is.
left?
Yeah. On the top left. That's him.
this
That one right there, yeah. Zoom. There he is. See his funny little face hanging off, and he's got hooves too. But he's hanging off of sky bands, and the numbers over there to the left keep counting in increments of 780 days, 10 times, and they bracket him, and his face is in there somewhere. Yeah, that like right above the first of the hoofed guys hanging down. All three of them. The top right glyph is his face.
That thing.
Yep, that's the one.
He has a weird hooked nose, huh?
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be Mars.
That is Mars, yep. He's identified in a bunch of other texts as well, but they don't always say, and he's associated with the number 780.
Yeah.
So this gives us the context of who that guy is. And then we understand it better, like the texts of Palenque talk about Mars. And when you go to the astronomy programs, he's actually sitting in the sky where, on the dates that they're talking about.
That's so crazy, dude. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Palenque did this crazy thing where the two farthest out planets, Jupiter and Saturn, they don't really work with the Maya or our calendar systems because they're exterior planets to us. Venus and Mercury are interior, and they're,
That was better. That was like,
around the sun.
that was Gromik's,
Mars,
almost
just by
Gromik's
weird
line.
Coincidence, if that's what it is 3 times.
Gromik goes from,
250,
the
so
boost.
It's easy for them to play the numerical games of adding Mars in. They kind of
Gromik goes from the light
they went around their main
along the black
but the
line
other two were hard.
all the way
The math
down.
didn't work because they do that retrograde motion as we see them. That there's a time where we're passing them.
So many
that they
stocks,
actually look
man.
like they're going backwards in the sky, night by night. They do a kind of zigzag. But Palenque figured out how to incorporate them into the calendar by making kind of a parallel system we call the 819 calendar. And it's apparent that was developed during the time of a king named Khan Balam, the son of Pakal. And he puts together these numbers.
Something like
He's
that.
the first one to show us the 819 cycle in the cross group. And there's a date that shows up again and again and again in the texts of the Palenque of the cross group. That's not the day that the temples are inaugurated. They're inaugurated like a year and a half later. But if you look at the date they keep talking about, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are in a really tight cluster in the sky that night, and all 3 of the temples of the cross group can see it. So it appears that his math before he built the temples was like, this is the perfect day to inaugurate this new calendar that incorporates those, and we need to make our opening date that day. But then, just like in modern times, his contractors failed him. They were like, but King, there's been so many days of rain, and have you seen the price of wood lately? We can't do it. And so a year and a half later is the inauguration date. But they keep talking about that date, and for a while we were like, why are they talking about that date? Until guys like me got access to modern astronomy software, and we could actually run the numbers and go, well, what's happening on that day?
At what point in human history did or in modern human history, did astronomy catch up or get sophisticated enough to figure out, holy shit, the Mayans were onto something?
I think that there were certain people that were more than 100 years ago that had access to ephemerises and knew how to use them. Those big ugly tomes, and like, I'll do the math here. People like Oysterman did it in the early 1800s. But nowadays, I guess it's the 1980s is when we started getting software that we can actually use on computers that wasn't just some guy in a little office somewhere with no access to each other or to tell people what he had found. But Floyd Lounsbury of Harvard was doing, he might be Yale. I love Floyd. I hope I didn't say that.
Shout out to Floyd.
But,
Harvard or Yale. Tomato.
He was a very nice guy. I know a lot of those guys.
Oh, that was like
the
perfect.
Ivory Tower types.
That was like perfect,
Talked with
almost.
everybody. Such a nice and gentle man, but he used those old ephemerises in
That was
the
terrible.
70s and maybe even as early
But let's
as
see what the gate
60s.
does.
I'm stressed out about the holidays.
Gate does
I can't stand
nothing.
going to all these
Terrible.
parties and functions, and Christmas shopping, and all that. That's why I'm embracing the natural power of legal cannabis this season with Via. If you haven't heard, Via is very well known for their award-winning hemp-based gummies, vapes, topicals, and calming drops. I've been taking their gummies for a while now, and I love them so much, I give them out to everyone I love, and I personally like taking the little quarter of one because I'm a pussy. And I like to microdose it throughout the day, especially when I'm trying to focus on something long-term, like reading or watching a documentary. Oh my God, it's perfect for that. But if it's late at night and I want to fall asleep quicker, sometimes I'll eat a whole one. And the great thing about the whole ones that I have, at least, because you can get them custom tailored for whatever experience you prefer, the whole ones that I eat, they don't keep me high all night. That way it doesn't affect my REM sleep, and I still wake up feeling fresh. Via legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging with a worry-free guarantee. No medical.
Man, those gummies look insane. Oh my God.
Perfect for relaxation and rejuvenation. Via is the only lifestyle hemp brand. They use compounds found in hemp along with active plant extracts to create products with specific effects.
Wow.
So you get a great tailored experience. Whether you
Those
want
look
to ease
amazing.
anxiety,
It looks like
manage your
Turkish
mood,
Delight,
just get
like
Via.
with
And
cannabis.
if you're not into THC, that's okay. None other products have it. Their CBD products are designed for sleep, focus, and energy too. They are experts in hemp extract and using it to get the effect you want naturally. Their products range from
Oh, that was like perfect. That was the Grow Meat line. Here we go, 54.
Whether you're looking to microdose or enjoy more of a potent effect. Via is handcrafted in the USA with no harsh chemicals and A/B
That was a
tested
little early.
and hemp certified. They've won awards for their customer service with over
It's
500,000
worse.
people served. This holiday season, give yourself some peace of mind. If you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description. For a limited time during the holidays, Via is offering 25% off site-wide, plus up to 50% off select items and bundles. And if you're hearing this ad post-sale, you can still save by using Danny for 25% off. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show by telling them I sang. Enhance every day this holiday season with Via.
To start figuring out some of this stuff. He's the one who really showed us for the first time that there was an 8/19 calendar and that it had something to do with Jupiter and Saturn.
And I might add, you know, when the expeditions of Stevens and Catherwood in the 1830s were happening, as they arrive in Belize and they go all the way up through the Yucatan and they visit various Maya sites, so much of these Maya cities are completely overgrown by the jungle.
Right.
And
It's pretty
the
good. It's not
alignments that
perfect,
so
but
many
it's-
of these buildings
it's
have
not
to
good enough.
astronomical bodies are completely covered up by the jungle. The evidence of it isn't even there until you clear the trees away, and you have people who are studying archaeoastronomy, which is really still kind of in its infancy.
Archaeoastronomy, that's a cool word.
Yeah. And you know, just studying the way that ancient cultures really studied their astronomical world. So much of this couldn't even be observed. Like when I was at this city that was near Kalakmul, El Ramonal, which is a pre-classic site, it's impossible to without modern day technology, without clearing away all the trees, it would be impossible to actually identify any alignments.
That's kind of what most of my career has been.
Sure.
You know, getting up on one of these buildings and scanning the entire thing for even one line of stones that I felt was intact. If I could get just one line of stones, I could guess at the alignment. But as you say, a lot of them, I got no stones.
Yeah, and in ancient
Oh,
times,
the boost.
you know, when these cities were at their peak, there, at least, you know, we think that most of these large cities, there are no trees that are growing in the middle of the city. They're clearing all of it down. I mean, they use the wood for everything from construction to stucco.
Oh, 2 boosts?
Even in Honduras at Copan,
Oh my
they
God.
actually, you know, their city began to fall apart because they had no trees left. But
Change the weather pattern.
Yeah.
No more trees, no more water dropped on their crops.
yeah, and so
No,
at
what's
El
that
Mirador,
piece?
You know, put yourself. So El Mirador is like, you know, the primordial, one of the first cities of.
Oh, that was at
Maya
least the
world.
fastest
Knock Bay,
piece I've
I think
had.
Knock Bay, you know, gets so big that they eventually move.
Still
over
wasn't
to
perfect
Mirador
though, but it was
and build another city.
faster. Not
So,
faster
You
than
gotta think, you know, these
faster
these
than my
tropical areas that
regular
are
route,
you know,
but
jungle areas that are constantly getting so much rain. They flood very easily. they're, these ancient people are constantly exposed to various dangers on the ground, such as the fertile ants, the snake.
Might have just been the boost,
as well as other snakes and other dangers. So you want to elevate yourself above the jungle. So they create these platforms that they live on. So they live on these big pyramidal platforms, and there's obviously no trees on those. So it creates this big, empty, open space where they're analyzing the stars. And over the course of El Mirador is as far back as 2800 BC, 2200 BC. I'm sorry, 2200 years ago.
Okay.
2000 BC. 200 BC. So good night. 200 BC, 2200 years ago. They are, they're studying the stars, and over the course of the last 2200 years, the jungle has just reclaimed it. And when you're walking out there, it's impossible to, acknowledge or determine any of these astronomical alignments. So much of it is it becomes the very last things that are determined as archaeology goes on, and you can clear out these cities more and more.
I think there was an initial bias looking at these things, saying, well, these people aren't really, they're savages, they're not scientific. We weren't even looking for astronomy in really any ruins at all until like the 1960s. And in terms of their ability to do so, they had the number system, which we don't know how old the number system is, but once they get a number system that they can really do math with, that was an aid. And then writing. When did writing start? When did books start? But one way or another, they were able to take a lifetime of research and hand it to a new generation.
Yeah,
that's really what excelled them beyond their neighbors.
Yeah, I jumped the gun on the astronomy, but for the long count astronomy, they're observing the stars over the courses of generations and consistently handing this down for a very, very long time.
Yeah. In the Americas, the first human beings that we have evidence for being in the Americas is how long ago?
Now we're thinking about 30,000 years ago. We've got the White Sands discovery, which seems to be holding its own. There were detractors at the start, but then there were rebuttals. These are the things, I've seen this happen way too many times. You get an amazing discovery, but then somebody shoots it down, and then it wasn't that way. But the White Sands thing, which is 23,000, that one's holding pretty strong. So archaeologically, our cap is now 23,000. In terms of DNA studies, they're saying that, you know how we can, those people in lab coats can figure out when things mutate. They're saying that the earliest DNA in the Americas
that was the Grow Meek line, man. That was fucking perfect. I might clip that. Like, that was literally perfect.
The weird number that nobody believes is more like 60.
That was right down the black.
What do you mean when you say change and isolate?
Come on, man.
We still believe that humans came across the Bering Strait when it was Bering G. And that, over a period of thousands of years, opened and closed and opened and closed. The last time it opened as a corridor that people could walk across was about 12,000 years ago.
Right, during the
then
last
it melted,
ice age.
and it's been water ever since.
Do you subscribe to the Younger Dryas hypothesis?
Not necessarily. I mean, I do believe that there was something that happened then. I don't know what humans were doing at that time and how much it impacted them. You know, I'm not a geomorphologist. There's that Younger Dryas thing has become so hotly contested.
Okay. So the last time people were able to make it across that Bering Strait land bridge was walking across, at least, was before 12,000 years.
Yeah.
Was it 12,000 years ago? Or was it 12,000?
A little faster.
12,000 years.
I don't know though. That was it was like a 1 second you had to wait there.
And so the first people that came across, you think they just kept going all the way down to South America, and I guess like Central America and all that, there wasn't a lot of ice down there by the equator during the Ice Age, right? So there was it looks sort of similar to what it looks like now. I think it crept up from Antarctica, but places like, with certainly things within the tropics never iced up. But if you looked at like
oh wow, I almost missed the stairs though. I wonder what this is. I wonder if this is 54. This is 54. It would be very interesting.
it would have a different shape for sure. There would there's a shelf that drops off steeply into the Pacific, almost the whole coast from Alaska down to South America. There's a shelf. I mean, not a totally flat shelf, but there's parts that we would have to know were land, and then there's a place that's drop off.
Okay. So they kept going and all the way down because the first evidence of people are like in South America. Am I right there? Like around Peru?
I mean, that's what the archaeology is telling us right now. That's and so that's the story we have to go with as far as our.
Is it true that the archaeologists?
Though, white sands just changed everything. I mean, now the oldest stuff we have in South America, like the great site of Monteverde. Tom Dillahay's site is at like 14,900 years, and for decades, when I was a student, that was the big discovery, and that changed everything and turned our heads on end and said, wow, is the oldest evidence South America? But now, just in the last year or two, white sands has clapped back with a 23.
Wow.
You have those sites in the eastern Amazon, right, in Brazil, that go back about 10,000 years.
Very old stuff there, but it's not older than Dillahay's site, Monteverde. Am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, there's so many sites in there.
Actually, the granddaughter of Teddy Roosevelt, Anna Roosevelt, has done heroic, great work in the Amazon and found pottery that was 9,000 years old. It's the oldest pottery in the entire Americas, and it's out of caves along the Amazon. How the heck is that happening? So yeah, I mean, I think we're still very much in the process. We've got to go with the information we have. I don't think we have all the answers. I think there are a lot of sites now that need to be revisited. When I was a student 30 years ago, I would read about things out of the Amazon that were 25, 30,000 years old, but the literature in my archaeology class would always conclude with, that's contested and inconclusive. In the literature. Yeah. So I think I'd like to see us go back to a lot of these sites and revisit them. Now that 30,000 might not be a crazy number, I'd like to go back to some of those crazy sites and have somebody redig them. This is a perennial problem with archaeology too. It's really not science because in many cases we can't replicate the study. You excavate something, you destroy it. Can another scientist independently go in there and dig up the same thing? No, you dug it up. And so, I've been on many a dig where we've intentionally said, let's only dig part of this site. Let's leave the other part of the site for future generations. In that kind of effort. But in some cases, like in the case of a cave or something, maybe there's just one part of the cave that's inhabited. If you dug it all up, that's all that the world gets to know about that for the rest of time. And the person who dug its interpretation remains the one.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of only being able to carry out, a dig or an excavation one time is the temple at Shavin de Hantar. And they essentially Shavin de Hantar is where the people of the Kural Supe culture, they get tired of trying to rebuild their. This is on the west coast of Peru, in this, it's like a desert beach. And they're building, arguably the very first pyramids on the entire planet, before your official date.
Right on the beach?
Pretty close to the coastline.
There's one
right?
on the beach, and then they go back in a river valley back like another 15 miles.
Yeah, and they're doing that to escape these storms called El Niños and La Niñas, and it just constantly hitting this civilization over and over and over again. Anyways, they get tired of rebuilding their city so many times. They go, we gotta get out of here. So they go up into the Andes, and this is where Andean civilization, we think becomes influenced by the Amazon. And I think maybe the first time we start seeing architecture with four walls and big interiors that you can walk into. I say big, but for ancient people, big interiors that you can walk into, huge stones, and they're being influenced by the Amazon. And I think this is where Andean civilization gets their pottery, right? This is one of the first places we see some pottery pop up.
there's earlier examples that are happening in Ecuador, but it's one of the main corridors where pottery starts being a common wear.
So really, really, really important site. And when archaeologists first discovered it, or the local people always knew that it was there, but
we're gonna have to watch Grow Meeks run again.
Out. And so when you pull everything out of its original context, you can't study it anymore, if that makes sense. It's not, that is not replicable. And so in that way, archaeology is kind of like a technique, right? You have to do it properly the first time because you can't repeat that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a good example. To elaborate on what Luke said, underneath Chavin de Pontard were these crazy labyrinths, and they would take twists and turns and have all sorts of little like closets along the way, but at the termination of these 5 or 6 different labyrinths were piles of different kinds of artifacts. There were some that have just animal bones, there were some that just had pottery, there were some that just had like stone sculptures. And the idea that's been passed down since that excavation is that this was a pilgrimage site, and people were taking specific things for specific purposes, and then the owners of the temple were stashing these things in kind of
I don't know, man.
in each one of
I'm not getting any fast
labyrinths.
gates.
But during those initial excavations, they cleared all that stuff out. They didn't really take a lot of pictures or drawings.
I haven't gotten a fast one yet.
I have never seen any. And so now we have this literature that describes this very important aspect of this early temple that argues a narrative that it's a pilgrimage site, which I believe, but the truth is, no archaeologist after that was ever able to assess those collections of artifacts independently.
Going back to the younger Dryas hypothesis, one of the most compelling things about that idea to me is
That's pretty good. That was a pretty good attempt.
Like things in Egypt, like the Great Pyramid, and you look at how crazy that thing is and how hard it would have been. The idea that makes it so compelling is that maybe it's possible that human beings were more technologically advanced, and then there was some sort of like cataclysm that like wiped them out, and then we had to like hit a reset on humanity where we kind of like knocked us back to the Stone Age and we had to restart.
Insane lock shot. That was amazing. That may have been my best lock shot ever in my life in Gate. That was so fast. It wasn't that fast, but it was my best one.
Polished granite boxes and stuff like that, and inside
I
the
think.
pyramids, and said, started putting their dead people in there and saying they were tombs. When you look inside of it, it's like, how do you explain all these crazy shafts that doesn't look like human beings were meant to be in here at all? Like, how did you move these giant 2,000-ton blocks 500 miles? To me, like, I'm really curious. I talked to Flint Dibble on here. He's the only.
Yo, True or Faith, what's up, brother?
Archaeologist.
Is that a Squirtle?
Yeah, I like.
That's amazing.
He was.
It's a sick
he made some
emote.
really strong cases for some things, but the Egypt stuff, he just.
What's up, man?
Just like had blinders on about the Egypt thing. He wasn't. I don't think he was open-minded about some of the Egypt.
Did you know?
events, like
LOL,
building
sup?
bases.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, the Egypt.
I'm trying the new strat. No, not the new strat, but the emulator strat.
Like, from your experience, has been.
I don't know the
consensus on, like,
lore
fellow
behind it,
academics on like the younger Dryas hypothesis, and what do they say?
but
or when you have discussions with them,
I'm just looking where Gromik,
civilization being reset.
where Michel Grousman
Well,
looked.
let me start by saying,
You noticed?
both you guys know a hell of a
Saw the vid once. Yeah.
I'm
Thanks,
an
man.
American
Yeah. Thanks, man.
archaeologist. I know.
I don't know, dude. I haven't gotten 54 yet.
Right.
So, the younger Dryas
I think I'm-
hypothesis, it's been around for a while. And
The cinema was a little weird getting used to at first, but
discussed it
I think I'm warmed up
many
now to the
colleagues and all.
cinema.
I see the fights on the internet over
Right.
it.
Oh,
And I
that was
see,
shit.
The root of
You know what I'm
discovering
instantly
its exact
thinking
nature, I think, falls
is
into,
emulator. You can change the sensitivity of the stick.
geoarchaeology or,
So I mean, I'm
geomorphology.
not saying I have the
I'm not a geologist.
best
I don't really,
range
there's a point to
myself,
which I
but I
read these
find it
papers and it crests my ability to
that could be a
evaluate
factor.
whether
I
that's
don't
just
know.
a bunch of smart talk or whether it actually makes sense.
Mm.
But like archaeologists have been talking about it before this whole did it destroy the
Oh, no
entire
shit.
ancient civilization and wipe it out?
Still getting used to the cinema.
My memory is that we thought that there was that the Younger Dryas has now been connected
The
to
boost?
this comet in a way that it wasn't originally. It was seen as
what?
a geological episode, and if memory serves,
Yeah, for sure.
there was a
All right,
there
let's
was a
let's watch it.
hypothesis
Let's watch the
as
video.
The ice age
do that.
was slowly warming up.
So I'm not gonna take a break.
ice
But I'm gonna reload the vape.
A
Watch the
huge
video.
lake called Agassiz in Canada melted enough to cause a huge flood of ice that kind of came down out of the rivers and into the Atlantic, and that flood of ice quickly lowered the temperature of the Atlantic and raised its sea level, so that it caused flooding on the coasts and radically changed the temperature colder again for, I don't know, a couple hundred years or something. Geology's funny like that. But that was what I originally read, and now there's a new idea that it was a comet,
Right.
that
Or a
impacted
series of comets, possibly.
something that impacted the Earth.
Yeah.
and
Randall Carlson seems to believe that it hit the North American ice sheet right above.
and
like,
that it
Canada.
answers the extinction of the megafauna.
The megafauna here and not Africa, right? Because Africa still has really large mammals, land mammals, and here we don't.
Right.
And then
But mammoths were all the way over to Europe though too. They died out in Europe. They were in Siberia. So that is a point to consider.
Okay.
Like yes, Africa's larger herd animals remained. So did Southeast Asia. But the wipeout of the megafauna in the northern climate was fairly at a uniform time. It wasn't just the Americas. It was also Europe and across to Siberia and into China.
Okay.
To Randall's point, a team that's working on this comet research. I don't know how these guys afforded it, but they paid so much money to have the entire United States LiDAR mapped. And I'm friends with one of the guys that's on this comet research group, and he was like, by doing this, we also vicariously created the highest quality LiDAR map of Native American mound sites that's ever been made. Would you like access to it? So I got access to it. Dr. Barnhart's seen it. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And,
Right here in your state, Luke's been finding all sorts of stuff along the river.
So this will be in the future. So there are, I would imagine that some people know about them, but there have to be hundreds and hundreds of mound sites. One in particular that could be, an entire ancient village in Florida that has never been documented before, and they're on this LiDAR map. So that's probably down the pipe for me in 2025, that I'm going to go document these things in person. But there are quote unquote, it sounds dramatic, but lost cities still in Florida, still in the U.S. Out in the woodlands that need to be discovered. And lost cities would
Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. There.
Oh, so he looks up in the center. Okay, that's different. I'm not looking up in the center. Let's play this in 2.25. I was watching it in 0.25 earlier. Shadow Gronique. Dude, it's so much more complicated than what I was doing. Like, there's so much I'm not doing. It's such a random angle, though. I guess you just look up at, like, the second light, and then you do diagonal to the last light, and then... or the second last light. Touch it. See, it was, like, perfect down the black. Oh my god, how useful is this crosshair? Holy moly. It's actually not that complicated. There's only like two important sets of lights that you need to really care about. It's not too complicated. So what's he doing there? Is he avoiding loading the guard or something? I don't know. Let's watch it at full speed. Man, you know what's funny about the Squirtle? When I was growing up, when I was a kid, I'm really blessed. I got blue in 98 or 99 or whatever, and I chose Squirtle, and my friend chose Charizard, and we would always battle, and each of them would be a keeper, and for me, Blastoise would be a keeper, only because my friend had Charizard. Obviously, Charizard is like the better pick, but I had an advantage on him every time, every battle. It was ridiculous. But anyways, all right, let's watch this. Okay, that's like, we can do that. We can do that. The I'm not gonna add the box boost now, but it makes me wonder about the left strafe box boost, if that comes into play again. Now that if you're doing left strafe, like a madman. How does he even do the stairs in left strafe, or the end in left strafe? That's crazy. That's so laggy though. That'd be like impossibly laggy on again. Maybe not an agent. Oh man. Should I just loop this? I'm gonna get some water. I'm gonna use a washroom. I think I'm just gonna loop it. Follow Gromeek. Do it. This world record. Yeah, that was like instant gate, man. All right, I'm gonna just loop in. Let me use the washroom. Be right back.
Absolutely full.
Well played. Shout out Gromik, Michel Grusman.
Of these big Mississippian cities that we've been
Yeah.
just ignoring for generations now.
Yeah, and I called the head of archaeology at the University of Southern Florida, and spoke to her on the phone and showed her just one image of this lidar map, and then it was after that she took me very seriously. She goes, "Where'd you get this?" And
Is it online?
No, it's
No.
it's like a private software that I'm just lucky enough to have.
I know a guy though.
Yeah. So I'll show you some photos
Okay.
offline. It's really cool. So on this map, they also have all the data that I've just glanced at it, and they have marked all these the superheated shrapnel from what they think is a comet that hits the North Atlantic ice cap, and that shrapnel
All right, a
flies
lot
across the
to
US,
change, but
and
we can do it.
I mean,
We look up
To
at the second
Carolina
light,
Bays?
similar to that, yeah. To that
and then we
point,
look
all the way,
across
from
the
east coast to
black
west coast, there is a
on
little
the
indentations
second
in the
last
ground
light.
that are, they're not very deep, but you can see them on lidar.
On the
And
second
they
light?
sprinkle all the way across the U.S. and all of them.
Yeah.
On the east coast, they're pointing northwest. On the west coast, they're pointing northeast, and they're all pointing towards some kind of impact site. Now,
Did those guys say when? Did they have an estimation of when these impacts occurred? I think that's a crux point of this argument.
Exactly. I think one half of the argument really wants it to be 12,000 years ago during the Ice Age. I think the other half is over 100 million years ago. So,
Oh wow.
yeah.
And I don't know who to believe. I'm not a geologist, and we live in a world where one team of credentialed people go against another team of credentialed people, and then we're stuck in the middle going, I don't know who to believe here.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen the images of the Carolina Bays, like the aerial shots of them, like how they have Steve? Maybe you can
No,
find it.
I don't think so.
The Carolina Bays. I had a gentleman in here, George Howard, who was showing this. He's part of that comment research group, and they've shown that there's all these perfectly symmetrical bays are in the Carolinas that say exactly what you were
something like
saying.
that.
It looks like they were shrapnel coming from the north, like a shotgun blast that went down into the Carolinas. They're right here.
Looked pretty good for
I'm
first attempt.
curious to
Those
like
little
the
circles in
craters.
the. Well, I mean, I could see where geology would say these are impacts. The question is how long ago,
Right.
and can geology stinks like that? Archaeology has carbon-14 and things,
Gotta
but
look up more.
geology can relatively date things by layers. But they don't have very good techniques to say, let's test this layer here. Oh, this one comes back at 100,000 years ago. Oh, this one comes back at 1 million. They don't have that, and so they give us vague, wide numbers about these things. This happened somewhere between 1 and 10 million years ago, or something. So.
Something like that.
Yeah, and
So we'd really need, if
That
any
wasn't
of these
right,
things could
though.
ever show
I had to look up more.
a half obliterated campsite or something like that, that would be a smoking gun. But to this date, I don't think we have that. Like there's Hancock talks about that impact crater that's right in front of the Serpent Mound.
the holiday season's creeping up faster than you can say pumpkin spice. And this year, it's time to make your family bask in your grooming perfection with Manscaped's latest masterpiece, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. It's the ultimate present for your face and everyone's eyeballs. Head on over to manscaped.com and join over 11
was pretty good. That was better.
million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using the code Danny Jones.
It was definitely
for
better.
20% off plus free shipping. This is simply the best shaver. I've tried every brand of shaver out there. This one's the best because I got a mirror in the shower. When I'm in the shower, I do all my shaving in there. It doesn't pull any of my hairs, doesn't make my face bleed, and it's as simple as that. It comes with 2 specialized heads, the 4-blade foil for that superhero smoothness, and the stubble trimmer, which is what I use, when you want that neat holiday scruff. These blades minimize irritation, which is why I love them. Because nobody wants to show up to a holiday party looking like they lost a fight with a Christmas tree. The Chairman Pro has the Flex Adjust head. I could shave Santa's neck folds with that pivoting
Oh,
head
that was
and
pretty
with
good
every
attempt.
curve and crevice.
We're getting
And
better.
like the stocking stuffer, it includes an LED spotlight because Manscaped rules. No more sink hair massacres. Just a quick rinse and you're all set. The Chairman Pro is so jolly, it's powerful enough to tackle 5-day growth, making it perfect for any shaving lifestyle. Get the Chairman Pro today to get the shave as smooth as you deserve. Our listeners get 20% off plus free shipping with the code DannyJones at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with code DannyJones at manscaped.com. This holiday, give yourself the Manscaped experience.
Which is
what's
in
the
Ohio.
Ohio. Yeah.
That big, beautiful serpent mound. His, first apocalypse. Ancient
Getting way
apocalypse
better.
thing, they wouldn't let him in the site. It was a big
Way
hubbub.
better.
He's right that the entire area is a big crater, and I think he may even be right that the people who made the serpent mound recognized it as a crater, or some kind of unique landscape. But to argue that the two are concurrent in time, we just don't have the data yet.
Right.
Like if the head of the snake was blown off by the crater, then boom, smoking gun. But there's nothing like that. So I think it's the time depth between these. Geology says for sure comet impacts and the time of humans. That's the wiggle room that neither side really has a viable answer to.
Right. The beach. Right?
Neither side can discount the other at this moment through science.
The beach that's right here on the other side of this studio is called Indian Rocks Beach, and the legend has it that there's a bunch of Indian burial mounds all around this area. And just recently, I think it was early this year, or maybe late last year, somebody was like building a house, and they were like ripping up part of the land, and they dug into a burial mound, an ancient Indian burial mound. And then it's
Earlier this year?
I believe it was earlier this year, or maybe it was last.
I laugh because my in-laws live here in your same town, and my mother-in-law has said for as long as I've known her that the Indian mounds protect St. Pete
From the weather.
The weather
Yes.
never.
That's
The hurricanes never come here because the Indian mounds protect us. And you're telling me somebody dug
It
them up?
just happened
like
recently,
earlier
and
this
now
year?
we just got
Well, there you
smoked
go.
by 3
Fat that guy
hurricanes.
is,
There you go,
man.
Diane. Your juju's right. Somebody
Right.
ruined it.
Yeah.
And then
Why
you
is
got
someone
Milton
just let
for
themselves get that
lean,
fat?
whatever you got.
Leaned and we got Miltoned. Yeah.
That's freaky.
Yeah, well, a lot of people here believe those myths about the hurricane,
Well,
about the
geez.
Indian
Did
magic.
everybody beat the tar out of the guy that dug that up?
No, they tarred and feathered him online. That's for
They're
sure.
really obese.
That's funny.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so you've known Graham Hancock for
Like
a long time.
unnecessarily
I
obese.
met him last year.
Oh, really?
I've known of him for a long time.
Okay.
So we've seen him before.
And Luke
He's
told
not a-
me
he's not
that
like a
you were
fat
supposed to
man.
be the original guy to debate him. Is that right?
Oh,
No, he is.
There was a moment where people were suggesting to me that I should throw my hat in the ring. And I was
okay.
like, no, I don't want to do anything like that.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to argue about these things. I love talking about it like now, but God, I'm not going to debate anybody.
He's
about
like
shit
disgustingly
I may or may not
obese.
know. I love having the conversation. I regret all the vitriol that's happened. It's such a wonderful thing that podcasts like this have created a new and wonderful audience for archaeology, and it sucks that it's turned into this ugly argument where everybody points fingers at each other and calls each other stupid. That's weird. And Graham is, of course, right in the intersection of that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Graham's definitely a great thing because he's like opened the eyes of like normal everyday people like me who can like look at this stuff and get interested in this stuff. He's made it like delicious, if you will, for like normal people, not people like you and Flint who have spent their whole entire lives like studying and reading and doing not just the fun stuff, but doing like the boring work too, right? Which is what I talked to Flint about on here. But I thought like Flint was able to, my first reaction was like, yeah, he really kind of like laid out a lot of context to some of the stuff that Graham talks about and filled in a lot of the blanks, especially in that podcast and when he came in here. But like I said,
Oh my
when I
god,
showed
it was
Flint
actually kind
these,
of
for
fast.
example, he was like, oh no, these could have easily been done with like flint chisels and pounding stones
Am I
and
tripping?
that kind of stuff.
I saw that whole part. That was fascinating.
And I was kind of like blown
Oh,
away
no.
because I felt like he was so reasonable when it came to the Atlantis stuff, right? Because he's an expert in Greece and in that time period when Atlantis was supposed to be. So the guy's like, he's an expert at ancient Greek stuff.
Yep.
and the excavation of Athens and those areas. So he knows that stuff probably more than most people. And like I thought he laid out a really compelling case of how Atlantis was probably not a real place. It was probably just like Plato's cave, right? It was just like this hypothetical thought experiment, philosophical idea that he
He
came
did
up
a great job explaining.
All about those low-key,
And then when
sneaky
he tried to explain
moves.
these, I was just like, there's some
Yeah,
sort
he
of
talked about those kind of drills that had like the bow drills.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
then-
a possible concept of how it was made.
Yeah.
The trick, this one obviously is a replica, or,
Yeah,
or
this is
did your
3D
buddy
print.
give you that?
It's a 3D print. Yeah.
Okay.
He had these 3D prints made of like some of the most, not all of
I
them
gotta
are
stop looking
perfectly
down.
symmetrical. He owns a couple dozen of them. But these two in particular,
know.
when they were
I have no
measured
idea
on,
if I'm
like,
reading it
scanning
right or
machines,
wrong.
some at like this big aerospace company,
I don't know.
they found out that like from edge to edge, from here all the way to the bottom,
I'm obviously not doing it
perfectly
right.
symmetrical within the variance
Oh, well.
of human hair. So
Amazing.
like unbelievably symmetrical that would, if we wanted to create that today with granite, it had to be done on a CNC machine.
I am equally fascinated and impressed by them, and I did think that Flint's attempt to explain how they could be done was on the right track, but I agree with you. We don't know how they did it.
Right.
But I mean, my conclusion of that is that they were freaking amazing, and we are still too stupid
Like,
to
it's still
figure out
not
how they did
perfect.
it.
Right.
I mean, they were that smart, but that doesn't make them, aliens, and it doesn't make them. It doesn't. Well, it might. I mean, there's arguments that we're aliens that.
Like, that game is worse.
That all of us are seeded from some other.
And
other
there's
place.
this weird thing that people do. Like, I think it's a weird thing that Flint does. After thinking about it for a while and like listening to his reaction to that and just like saying that, like trying to avoid
playing
the
2.x
conversation by saying
if
that,
you were
like,
wondering.
oh, because he purchased that, he's contributing to the cartels and he's contributing to like the black market. I don't even want to touch that. I don't want to be in the same room with that. Like, it's heresy for anyone to purchase these things and like have them in their own possession. This belongs to archaeology. This
fuck
belongs
me.
to us. So I can't entertain that conversation. It's like a weird cognitive dissonance.
Well, I have contemplated that too. It's always, it's a risk for me as a professional archaeologist coming on shows and just casually talking off the cuff about things like that. I could get myself in trouble for accidentally advocating looting or some shit.
Right.
But, Flint is in a position where he is an archaeologist and he has a responsibility to talk as
Oh, that was my
conservatively
best
as
attempt
he
yet.
can
No,
as a
it's fine.
as a
I just wanna see
representative of
what
his
the door
field,
does.
Whereas Graham is not an archaeologist. He's
Right.
a journalist, and he has
Right.
a freedom to hypothesize in a
Oh,
way
yeah, it was a little
that
faster.
Flint would
Slow
be
run, though, a lot of
criticized by
stops.
by his colleagues for.
It's a little faster, though.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think lots
Maybe.
of archaeologists have flaky ideas. We
theory.
just talk to each other different because we're in the
It's
club.
shitty gate.
I don't think, and if you listen to Graham, he never says these are facts. He says this is my gut feeling. These are hypotheses.
Yes.
And he's free to hypothesize like that as an investigative journalist.
Oh, those are good
and be
stairs.
responsible
Maybe
within
55.
his own
There's a lot of
field
stucks,
in a
though.
way that Flint, if he said the same thing, would be deemed irresponsible within his community because he has a responsibility
Wow.
to only forward the things that
What
we
does it
have
mean?
factual evidence for. We can
What does it mean?
hypothesize up to a point.
We don't
but
know.
I
No
think
one
another
knows.
aspect is
It was a
that,
faster
we
gate. It was a faster
archaeologists
gate.
really try to come up with hypotheses that we can test.
That was like my
There's,
perfect.
there's
That
tons
was the
of
one I
hypotheses.
said
We
that
could
it
all
was
say,
my
well,
best attempt. I think I'm gonna
I
let's
think there was a
up time.
civilization 12,000 years ago. Okay, well, where's the proof?
Best.
Right.
Do
Looking.
we have an artifact assemblage? Do we have
Angles.
buildings? Do we have a chronological sequence of things in a stratified dig? Those are the things that we try to come up with hypotheses that are testable. And if they're untestable,
That's
well,
really
then,
interesting.
at some point we stop talking about it, at least in archaeology.
Totally.
So he's, I think that people like Flint and myself are bound by being representatives of our field to try to
It was a pretty good attempt.
not profess hypotheses that we have no possible way of testing and proving or denying.
Yeah, that's the thing about people like Graham versus people like Flint. There's this, and obviously I think it is a problem with people who are tied to like the big academic institutions that like they can't speak out of turn because they have the fear, right, of being criticized or losing their positions or whatever. It's this whole idea of the centralization of education.
See, I have no such position. I can talk whatever the hell I want to talk about.
That's beautiful.
I'm my own boss. But I am just as educated as other folks are, probably in many ways more so, at least for the Americas. I don't know anything about a lot of other parts of the world. And, just for the record, I like the
Oh, that was a really good
dreaming
attempt.
hypotheses thing.
It wasn't perfect though, but it was very good.
Hancock come up with, as long as it's not.
See, I think because the 54, it was perfect. My dot was right on the black. Like, it was perfect. Oh, it's pretty good. Pretty good pace.
Archaeologists, if you
Might be
ask them
54
honestly how they
pace.
got started in archaeology, it was
Maybe.
dreaming about
No
fantasy
boost.
things,
For sure.
and then we find a shade of that in history work, and we go from there. But I mean, this is how we get inspired, and
Yes.
we do owe folks like Hancock a debt of gratitude that he has inspired millions of people to be interested in the kind of things that I do.
Yeah, I think I probably would not be sitting here if I hadn't read Fingerprints of the Gods as a young teenager.
Right.
Oh, that was like
Fingerprints of the
my
Gods was the very first
way best
very
attempt.
first place that I ever learned about the Olmecs. Olmecs
That was really good
highly
attempt.
fascinating, but very little published about them, right? Especially in popular media. So that makes it into Fingerprints of the Gods, which came out in 1995, and that sort of kind of pushed along whatever interest it had, and probably expanded the interest. So I read about the Olmecs in that book. I read about the Amazon, and at about 16 or 17, and that kind of fuels an interest. I also read about Egypt, so I start studying ancient Egypt, and by the time I'm about 21,
Getting better.
I decide
I might have been a bit late
that
there.
I'm not going to be able to get through college if I keep going down this marketing route. I've got to do something that I loved, and I was always inspired by we talked about last time, like all my grandfathers were explorers and antiquarians that funded digs out in the at these Mogollon sites in New Mexico and discovered some cool stuff, and that inspired me, but also Graham Hancock kind of fueled that wonder, I wonder if there is, something out there. And so when I first started, I was, really hardcore on the pyramids have to be 12,000 years old. And just because I hadn't exposed myself to anything else beyond that. But then
When you first came on the show, you were pretty, you believed that. You were pretty stuck. You were talking about a piece of wood that you thought was like one of the pyramids.
Well, so what I was saying was I think that, okay, so this is kind of leading into what I'm saying is I think that as I started to educate myself more, I read Fingerprints of the Gods and then just wanted more and more and more and more. And so you pick up textbooks at a certain point because it's just you can't get enough. And then you read things in textbooks that challenge the preconceived notions that you had. And so I've done a huge dive just on Giza in the last year, and learned a lot of things that have challenged my beliefs about the pyramids. And I think that even Graham Hancock has come around to the greater part of the pyramids must be fourth dynasty, under the pharaoh Khufu. He talked about this on either Rogan or another podcast, but I clipped it and put it on my X account, and I became exposed to information like, and I got to see these just a month ago. These
Pretty good.
These cedars
Pretty
of
good.
Lebanon that are inside the it's quote unquote burial chamber, but without a sarcophagus. It's a strange chamber in the pyramid.
In what pyramid?
The Bent Pyramid. So
Pyramid.
up at the highest chamber in the Bent Pyramid, there are these cedars of Lebanon that are
Wasn't that
built
good?
into the pyramid, and they only could have been placed there at a time before the top of the pyramid. Maybe the last 10% is no, I'm sorry. The next 50% is built because it's only about halfway up in the pyramid. But those cedars of Lebanon
He also
lock
shoots
that
randomly. I don't know if
pyramid
shooting is
into a certain
important.
time frame. They carbon date
Like
them
he shoots the
about,
guards.
they're about
Not randomly, but maybe he's trying
years
to
ago.
get a boost. I don't know.
2800 BC, And so we know exactly how
That was
old these
really
trees
bad.
are, so they kind of lock them in place. And you discover more things like that, like how we were talking about earlier, where you were saying, a smoking gun for a civilization existing in the Americas 12,000 years ago would be, well, what if one of those, meteorite fragments just destroyed a city, right? Well, at Giza, we actually have something that's sort of similar to that. The construction of Menkaura's. You have the Great Pyramid, you have the Second Pyramid or the Middle Pyramid, and then you have Menkaura's pyramid. Well, you have the Mortuary Temple, you have the Long Causeway, and it goes down to the Valley Temple. That Valley Temple there, during its construction,
Sounds way better.
destroyed a workers' village. There's like these rubbish pits that are they pretty much just picked up the city and dumped it off to the side as they're building that causeway and as they're building that Valley Temple. And so when they go through the rubbish, they find these seals with a cartouche, and a cartouche is like the encircled sacred name of the pharaoh. And they only find the two previous pharaohs, which are Khufu and Khafra. Menkaura doesn't appear on there anymore. And so it shows that the city was destroyed during the creation of that Valley Temple. And it's, I learned that in some obscure textbook that, I would have never guessed 10 years ago that I would read. I picked it up in Luxor while I was in Egypt. And, become more exposed to information like that. And slowly, my view on things starts to change. But at the core of where I started in this journey was reading Graham Hancock. And so that sense of wonder has never left me, although my perception of archaeology has become much more dialed in as time has gone on. But I still keep that wonder of and excitement about things that we don't understand, like how these vases could have been made. How they, I got to see the unfinished obelisk in Aswan in Egypt.
Wow,
1,200 tons made out of solid red Aswan granite. It's just, that's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And the peculiar thing is, they have to free out the bottom of that whole obelisk. And then what you don't see in a lot of photos is right behind it, to get to the Nile, they have to clear out the whole granite outcropping that is, just the same size, much bigger actually than the obelisk. They have to clear all that out and clear out this causeway and pull that obelisk down into the river, where they're going to load it onto a barge and take it 500 or 300 miles where it's going to go. A lot of these things are still unexplainable, but for me, as time has gone on,
I don't think I went far enough
the
there.
magic was really instilled in me from reading things like Graham Hancock. But over time, like I was saying, my views have become more dialed in. And for me, it's not really a question of timeline now, more so a question of technique, or, if we want to call it ancient technology. And so that's why I think that, Graham Hancock, give credit where credit's due, because none of anything that I'm doing now, maybe I wouldn't be doing anyway.
The cinema is weird.
It's
weird. The ending's different in cinema.
Here's a funny sequence of just what he was talking about, involving Luke. You were inspired by these sort of things. When Luke and I first met, one of our first conversations were about, I'm really still ignorant about how to do this whole thing, how to do the podcast and social media thing. And so Luke tells me, what's really hot on the internet right now? A search word that's again and again is the Olmec. And that was that interest in the Olmec came from folks like Graham Hancock. It didn't come from archaeology textbooks. It was tons of people learning that there was this mysterious culture they knew nothing about, and they want to know something about it, right? So Luke tells me the Olmec is a huge keyword. You want to do anything that involves the word Olmec, and then people will be interested in it. And so not long after that, the great courses, who I've been working with for years, call me up and they say, you know what, our marketing department
That's a better place to switch there.
wants to know more about the
I
Olmec
think.
these days. Would you be willing
I think it's
to
a better
do
place.
a 12-lecture series on the Olmec? And so for the last year and a
Like
half,
a few
that's
feet
exactly what
before
I've
the
done.
door.
We're
Because
now
when you
in
hit the door, you're just
post-production.
ready to go
There'll
and
be
right
12
straight.
lectures coming out
I
about
think
the
it's- I
Olmec
think
to the
it's
best
right.
of my ability, telling everybody all the little details that they'd want to know in a vetted source. They're so great there. They have a whole team of fact checkers who just scrutinize everything I say down to, was it 750 BC or was it 751 BC? Because these sources contradict what you say. So really super vetted thing. But it began with the inspiration of a whole bunch of people wanting to know more about the Olmec because what's, pejoratively called pseudoscience created that interest.
Yes. Well, that's a great segue to us. Maybe you can give us some of the highlights of that. Can you tell us where? So the Olmec, one of the first groups of people that were in South America, or in what was it, Mesoamerica? Okay.
Yep. They have been traditionally called the mother culture.
Right.
They are the first ones to really build big cities, to organize tens of thousands of people together, to create at least the evidence of a religious structure. Like they were the first ones to make religious art, and they interacted with a bunch of other cultures. Nowadays, I see it at least as a more co-evolutionary thing. A lot of interaction was happening with the people who would become the Maya, with the people who would become the Zapotec and the Mixtec, and the valley where the Aztecs would develop like 2,000 years later.
Okay.
So they interact with them, but they are...
And what timeline, what part of history?
We're talking Olmec run from 1800 BCE to 500 BCE. So 1,300 years worth of them, and then they turn...
I think I grinded there.
Calls them, at that point, the Epi-Olmec,
Whatever.
and that goes on to about 280.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about the Olmec, we're talking about these big...
It would have been
stone
55
carved heads,
anyways.
right? They almost look like they're from Africa.
That makes sense.
Like
There's a
African
slow gate.
Right. There's one of them there. Luke and I just went through and saw every one of them. Luke's actually bringing a group in 2 weeks for Maya Exploration Center all through that area.
Last time you were here, we were
It was
going
an
through all these photos.
acceptable lock shot. It was not spectacular.
And then one was in China, so I missed it by one, but I think it's back.
Okay, cool.
But these heads are what everybody's fascinated by, and they are incredible. And their faces are very evocative. They do look African, though.
And that's
they're
controversial to say, right? People don't like that.
No, I mean it's common to say. In fact, it didn't start in pseudo-archaeology. It started with the very first person who was a historian who took a look at them in the 1800s. The first one that at that time they were calling the head of Wayapan. Now it's Tres Zapote's head one. A historian came through and looked at it and said, when he wrote it up after his journey, he said, and that looked very Negroid. And that begins it. But when you look at the faces of the people of the Coatzacoalcos River Basin, they are like this. They have these wide noses and thick lips. It's just a local characteristic.
Yeah, I told.
I'm not touching the light. I'm not fast enough to touch the light
the big ass guard who
with my dog.
Yes,
That might be the reason.
So I get to this little museum.
We'll try that
and we
after.
Get there. I'm knocking on the door and we wait for a
Yeah,
couple
we'll
minutes.
try
The guy
that.
he's probably taking a nap inside the museum.
It was early. I mean,
Yeah,
like
oh,
8
that's so
a.m.
true.
It was 8 a.m.
Yeah. So, and you can see on the visitor sheet at the front, like nobody had been there in weeks or something, So he opens up the door, and I'm looking at this guy's chest, this huge man, and I look up, and it's this guard who's working there, and sure enough, there's an Olmec head sitting on top of this guy's body. Like, he looked exactly like an Olmec.
And he was freaky big for someone in that area.
Sure.
That happens all the time. I mean, everywhere there's some, there's that famous Chinese basketball player. I mean, he is 2 foot taller than the vast majority of the people from his country.
Do you remember that 90-year-old man that was there who told us that in the early 1900s they exhumed those 6+ foot tall bodies
Oh
out of the
my
Red
God.
Palace at San Lorenzo?
Yeah, he was pretty tall himself.
Look how slow was
He
that?
did say that. That's true. I did not put that in my in my Olmec lecture thing. I talked about it with the producers. I said, this is an actual guy who actually said that. But he couldn't produce, I asked him, where did the skeletons go? He said, they went to the lab, and that's the last I saw them. And that's, well, I can't really work with that, man. I can't just take a guy in cowboy boots' opinion that there were giants. But he was a member of the excavation, and he was a multi-generational archaeologist, too. His grandfather was an archaeologist there. So he knew what he was looking at. He did say that.
Yeah.
He said there were, 3 or 4 bodies that he didn't say, He said they were taller than him, is what he said.
Now,
You're getting the story
and he was
from
a
me
tall
because
guy.
he was talking in Spanish, and
That's true.
and I told you on the bus afterwards what this guy said.
Yeah.
But he did say it. You're right.
Yeah.
Now, the look of these heads, the way they look like they're kind of African facial features, is that very different from the way the Aztec or the Maya were depicted?
Yeah. Yep. They depicted themselves differently, but that was, hundreds of years afterwards. There's we all focus on these ones that look so African.
Right.
There's a whole nother set of them that look totally Chinese. If you
Really?
dig deep, yeah, especially the baby ones. I do discuss that in the lecture series, that a lot of these, that we call them chubby babies, and they're so fat their eyes are like squinted.
Wow,
Like
look
that?
at that.
No, I
Okay.
mean that one's another
Wow.
thick lips one.
Yeah.
Look up like Olmec chubby baby. There he is.
There we go.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Look at that guy. That guy looks pretty Asian, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And part of the reason, or a possible explanation, let me say, is that
Interesting.
all of the people of the Americas are Asiatic in phenotype. DNA is very much confirming that everybody that's an American Indian, their DNA
Looks like Trump, the middle one.
phenotype-wise is from Asia. And even the Maya themselves have a trait that they don't talk about very often, or it's just private business. But their babies are born with what's called the
There you go. I
Mongolian
touched the light.
spot,
I did it.
this kind of
I
birthmark
touched it.
right above their
I've
butt.
heard of that.
It's a very Mongolian trait, and the Maya, typically I've seen a friend's baby with that spot on their back. It goes away I think certainly by year 2. But it's they are born on the outside with a very Asian trait. So even today, it's they're genetics wise, they're very Asian.
How did the Olmec get there?
I think they were homegrown.
Homegrown.
They developed there from hunter-gatherers into basic farmers. What's funny, one of the things I'm gonna push back on in my series is we have traditionally, we archaeologists have said, it was the advent of intensive corn agriculture that allowed the Olmec to grow in such huge numbers, to feed a population where they could have a city that had 20, 30,000 people in it. But it's turning out that the oldest of the cities, named San Lorenzo, actually wasn't doing corn farming, only a very little bit. They had created this incredible riverine resource system where they put themselves up on a high plateau with this huge kilometer-long platform for the royals. But then there were 20, 30,000 people around it, all fishing, and they would wait for the seasonal inundation to flood all of the floodplains below, and they'd build up these little islands where they would smoke and cook the fish that they were getting out of that and make it kind of, less perishable. It would last longer. But that was one of their main resources, that and shellfish. And by the time other cultures influenced them enough to be intensive corn farming, San Lorenzo realized that where they were positioned sucked for corn farming. It was seasonally inundated. So the civilization shifted to another part of that area, and the site of Leventa turns up.
I think it's 55.
Leventa has tons of corn farming around it. They picked a better place.
It was
to
a
do
kind
corn
of
farming,
faster
but the
gate. It might be
origins of Olmec
54.
society are not agriculture.
Wow, I was
They figured out
54.
how to just
Insane.
harvest
That's really
fish and
interesting.
shellfish out of their region on a whole new
That's really
level.
interesting.
And how? And what is the academic consensus on how they were able to cut and move these giant heads all across the lake?
Wow, that's really interesting.
Down the rivers, across through the forest. It seems like it's almost insurmountable.
I mean, I don't think there is a consensus. I think the commonly accepted story, I will say, is that they did combinations of floating them down rivers and rolling them on rollers. But I don't really see it happening. In fact, for sure, the old idea of a raft does not work. I had a marine engineer who came on a trip with me one time, and as a gift, he made me this magnificent Excel chart that had formulas in it. And
Can you
I could say,
imagine if I
okay,
get
if my
53
raft
like
is
this?
made
Like, I
out of
can't.
this
It'd be
liquid
insane.
wood
It's too
and it's
ridiculous.
50 foot wide, how much
Like, it'd be
tonnage
too
can it
ridiculous.
hold before it sinks?
Right.
And this formula that he made me, I was able to plug in. I couldn't get anything higher than really 3 tons not to sink a raft that was as much as 100 feet across. And there are places, bows in the river, where that would just wedge. So, you can't build a raft big enough to not sink. Like, there's a perfect example of this old theory.
Right.
See, that thing, the one that they show displayed there, there's the head in the background, those are like 15, 25 tons. There's no way. And I had a nautical engineer do the math for me. That would sink like a rock. Now, he had a really cool alternative hypothesis. He said, let's use the principles of Archimedes and buoyancy, and instead of trying to make a flat thing that got sunk, what if you put a bunch of logs around it that were vertical? And so, like, just painted a fence around it, and it would act like a bobber. If all of the logs weren't flat, horizontal, but they were vertical, the water displacement won't allow you to put a stick straight down in the water like that without it floating. It's more resistant. So he had this idea that, like, maybe they were like bobbers. They'd just cover them in vertical,
Oh, that was like
thick
perfect.
logs, and they could float them down the river like that, and it would be a much tighter radius. Now, that's also totally unproven. As
Right.
unproven as these pretty pictures are right here.
Yeah, kind of just adding on to that. So what he was saying about that formula where he could plug in a theoretical weight of an Olmec head, and he really couldn't get, if he put a 3-ton Olmec head on a raft that would wedge going down the river system, then it would still sink the raft. Well, the smallest head is 5 tons. The largest head is the La Cobada head, and I've seen estimates at least 42 tons, and then now in the last few months, maybe the last 6 months, I've seen the estimate up at like 50 tons.
And how far away are those big ass heads away from where they cut them?
From La Venta, 70 kilometers.
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty
That's
fast.
huge. And so
It's a
no,
54
we don't-
pace.
We don't know how they moved.
If I get a boost, it might even be 53, honestly.
And what kind of stone is it made
No
out of?
boost, though.
Basalt.
It's fine.
It's basalt. Okay.
It's definitely
So it's a
54.
softer stone.
No, it's pretty hard. It's limestone is much softer than it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, basalt's one of the harder
But
stones in Mesoamerica.
basalt can be right there with granite.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's 43
in
miles.
fact, in Sterling's papers, he
Through a swamp.
yeah.
Oh, no, I
You're
fucked it up.
taking that through all different types
Damn
of
it.
terrains, but in some of Sterling's
56?
earlier
That's like
papers, he
54.
actually describes he found these
Yeah.
huge columns that are this big around, a few feet by a few
The
feet
gate
thick
was
and,
like a little bit
6+
faster.
feet
It
tall
was a
that would have been
54
sitting
pace
in
gate.
I think there were some in the Red Palace. He's found some just discarded next to the river, and he described them as being granite, but they were really basalt.
Oh,
so,
okay.
I mean, they're extremely hard.
I mean, there are ways to move these things that
Yeah.
don't
Oh, the
involve
boosts.
modern
Insane number of
technology.
boosts.
Like
Whoa, bro.
I'm a huge fan of this guy,
Definitely.
Wally Wallington. I want to meet him someday. But he
Whatever.
built Stonehenge in his backyard in like Michigan or Wisconsin, single-handedly. He's a
Really?
retired contractor.
Same size?
Yeah. There he is.
Oh, this
Wally
guy.
Wallington. God, I love Wally. I sent him $50 I didn't have because Wally needs more cement. The concepts he's
Yeah, play
talking
one of
about are
his videos.
so profound and simple.
Yeah. He just uses like counterbalances,
There,
right?
and he moves them by putting 2 rocks or pivot points underneath them, and he spins them. And every time you spin them, it moves half the distance of the 2 pivot points. And with that,
That was, like,
alone,
perfect.
just Wally.
That
not a
was
group of
the
people,
Grow Meek.
has moved all this stuff. That's a particular one where
That was
he's
the
showing
Grow Meek
how
special.
he can mount one up. And he also shows how he can lift them up, the top
Come on,
stones.
dude.
He's doing this by himself with nobody else helping.
Yeah, those are his brother-in-laws, I think, watching him. Those guys are funny. At the end, they were like,
the bottoms.
call it Wally Hinge. Call it Wally Hinge. No, call it Stonehenge Reloaded. They're so great. But here's this, relatively simple man who has shown without major tools how to do this. And that's not to say we know that that's how it was done by the Olmecs or the
Right.
Egyptians or whoever, but
Those weren't necessarily symmetrical stones either.
Wally inspires me just like the wonderful stories of folks like Hancock. I mean, he is showing us what's possible. But Wally is different than Hancock. That Wally freaking proved it.
Yeah.
And Wally's been doing this for a few decades. Imagine when you have an entire industry of people doing this and trying to further.
I love that one.
That's crazy.
Imagine you have an entire industry of people, highly intelligent people doing this over the course of centuries. How much you're able to invent and learn how to.
He's got one that shows the same angle that the pyramids of Giza are at, and how he can make a simple lever system that he can haul 5 times, 10 times his own weight by himself with this particular angle. He can haul it straight up.
That's so interesting, man.
So he really there he is twisting it. He's got 2 pivot points underneath, and he is just turning it. And every time he turns it around, it goes half the distance between the 2 pivot points. This is difficult, but I mean, this is how you would move a giant stone.
Yeah, and if you had a really deep, sophisticated understanding of math like they did, why wouldn't they be able to figure out some sort of...
And you're also motivated by, zealous religion. And also I think there's a more practical part too, like creating something huge and magnificent like this. Like, why did they do it? Well, I think number one, on the most boring and practical levels, it's a WPA project. You're a big man king, 100,000 people want to follow you. If they don't have something to be engaged in this civilization, then what are they doing there?
Right.
So these big projects they make together cement cultural identity.
Right.
But they're also,
That's
they're on a religious level.
Oh, am I doing?
Look at him just move
That's
that
so
thing
cool.
so simply. I love Wally.
And if they if they did use some sort of wooden wedges like this or wooden levers to move stuff like this,
Like, how
obviously
is
we
this
wouldn't have the
guy
evidence of that would be gone.
Moving this
We would
block
just have the
like so
stones.
obese.
Right.
So it would make sense why we wouldn't have evidence of that kind of stuff.
You'd think
There's
he would
there-
not be
there are
obese
these
at
things.
all.
Luke and I were just in Peru and Machu Picchu and Cusco, and there are these big stones that have just 2 like titties on them. And they're in the walls. Why wouldn't they just shave them off? Are they proud of them? Why wouldn't they just close them off? A lot of people say, oh, they're where they would lash ropes so they could move these big
These are
stones.
those nubs.
But they're
Oh,
always
yeah,
they're
yeah.
always in 2s, and I wonder whether they aren't the evidence of Wally's pivot points.
Yeah, but the one thing though that I can't explain is the freaking scoop marks. Or so the way those stones, it looks like they were cut using some sort of acid to soften it or something.
That is a theory that I'm actively trying to figure out. I think it was acids, and there are weird white marks that look like somebody cleaned up a spill on the walls. They are.
I don't know, I might
There's
try
lots
this
of
for another half hour
unexplained
more.
evidence. Now that one gets into how did they fit them so tightly, not move them, but
The
the
acid stuff.
acids wouldn't help them move them,
But the
fitting
acids would
them
help
together.
them cut it though, right?
Right,
Yeah.
or fit them perfectly.
Yes,
Like
right.
the
Okay.
conventional theory is they were using hammer stones, and they would just
Right.
pick up a 5-ton stone and go, okay, let's set it down on this one. It's not quite right. Pick it back up. I'm gonna peck this place. Okay, no, do it again. Oh no, do it again.
Yeah.
It's
Like
it would take so much effort. But when it comes to effort, a colleague of mine, Bill Fash, once said something that I love. I repeat it on all these things, I think. That he simply said, when you're making something for the gods, it's not supposed to be easy. So I think us Westerners are always looking at something like that and noticing how much work would go into it, or our minds boggled at like, but that would take so much effort. And to our minds, we're always about efficiency. Like, well, you know, if you're smart, you're efficient. But if you're devout, maybe you do it the long way. And the harder it was for you, the greater your act of devotion. So I think that's a profound thing to always keep in mind when we of one culture and time are trying to understand the motivations of ancient people.
Right.
You know, doing something the long and hard way is an act of devotion, not stupidity.
And that says a lot about like the ultimate direction the societies are heading in with their values. Like if you look at our society, our ultimate values are the economy and working in our 9-to-5 job to survive. And if you look at it from a grander scale at the whole country, it's like making the economy survive, increasing our GDP, making things more profitable, right?
Not
streamlining stuff like that, and like there's no profit in there's nothing to gain monetarily or economically from building a huge shrine that would take hundreds of years to do.
It's that kind of thinking that's going to close the National Science Foundation. I don't want to see that happen. There are senators a couple years back, I remember, because a Maya sites grant was specifically questioned in Congress as to, a congressman was saying, National Science Foundation gave $50,000 to dig up a Maya pyramid? How does that profit America? How do we make any money on that? Congress should have oversight and not allow that. And we can only allow science that is going to produce a technology that makes us money.
Right.
If that was our attitude, we wouldn't learn jack or shit.
Right. Yeah, after like all the people that I have that come in here to talk about the ancient world and the stuff that you're talking about, I just like, it kind of...
Oh, come on. I fucking pop that up.
Weird, like, web
What's that pause on?
Of an idea that like our civilization might be devolving because of technology. It's almost like it makes sense that we were way more sophisticated or advanced in the past because of the lack of technology, right? Something to do with us being surrounded by all these screens and all these cell phone towers everywhere and self-driving cars and these iPhones that can connect us with anyone instantaneously. It's like it buried all these deep senses inside of our bodies to where it almost like turned off some sort of magic within us,
But the irony is that we've made communication technology that's better than the planet has ever seen, but it seems to just be separating us. Like in a physical sense, it's isolating us. We can communicate like never before, but the product is our isolation individually.
Yeah, totally. What do you make of how these cultures in South America and Egypt and China and all over the world were building these same types of structures at the same time? Like what how do you think they were connected and so like it seems like even when you have the alignments to the cosmos and these temples like Göbekli Tepe and in Egypt and in Central and South America, it seems like they were all obsessed with the cosmos and building pyramids and all these similar gods and like flood myths and things like that.
When it comes to the flood myth, I think that's connected to the Ice Age, that everybody was, the rising and lowering of the seas. I think that was something that humans were experiencing all over the planet. So that particular one, I think, is fairly explainable. That one narrow part of what you just asked about. The other part, I personally favor a theory of what Star Trek called human parallel development. Star Trek went on to see it, in all sorts of planets and things, and of course that was fantasy. But I do think that we as human animals on this planet have certain compunctions inside of us that are almost instinctual, and they are an investigation of our world, and they are communication. And so I think certain things, there were also necessities. We need shelter, we need food. How are we going to go about this? I don't see it like at least Graham's early books would suggest that it was an advanced ancient civilization that the rest of us got pieces and fragments of and are now still digging our way back up. I think it was independent, around the world, and that it's kind of a product of humans being the animals we are. That's a theory, just like Graham's is a theory or a hypothesis. But I see us as the parallel developing, the concept that we could build a house. We lived in a cave, but we could build a cave anywhere. Let's do it, and it ends up with 4 walls and a roof. Moving stones. One that really I think is a very particular invention that I'm fascinated by is the bow and arrow. That one seems to have not just come from one place and spread out, independently developed, but that's a very... I look for things that are what archaeology calls diagnostic artifacts. These are very particular to this culture, as signatures on culture. But no,
Where did the
let me
bow
get
and arrow
myself
start?
back to your Africa, like long ago,
Okay.
at least. I won't pretend I remember the date.
Steve, that's what we got, Steve.
One of the things I would add on there is I think for people building pyramids all over the world, one highly conservative, like sober answer might be I was walking through the jungles around the city of El Mirador, and I had never seen so many ants in my life before. Whether they're soldier ants or fire ants or leaf cutter ants. And the group of people that I was there with, I was talking to them, and I was like,
I was gonna say 70,000. Damn, I should have
The
said
bow and arrow originated in Africa during the Paleolithic period, around 71,000 years ago.
I had 70 in my head. I was scared to say it. Darn it.
I love how they use a picture of like a modern fucking
Sorry,
compound bow.
Luke, I interrupted you. We were talking about ants.
Well, and I was just saying, ants work in much of the way that maybe the Maya people do or did. They work in unison. They bring resources back and forth, and what do? They build pyramids. It's in them to do that. They're going to do it naturally, and it makes sense in their little tiny brain. And so, it could be that human beings, we are wired that way, if that makes sense. Like ants build ant mounds, they build their own little pyramids all over the world. Well, human beings are going to do that too, because maybe it makes sense to build a structure that way. You want to build a structure that's
practical
huge.
element of what you're saying too.
It's a good point.
It turns out looking like a mound because without mortar or rebar, they can't build it up high without it splaying out unless it has a fat base going to a tiny top. That's the most boring explanation of why pyramids are all over the world.
Yeah.
Any kid, your kids, if they have blocks, they can build a tower a couple of times and the other one
that was
pushes
pretty
it
good.
over. But if you
This is
build
the
something
run.
with a fat
I can
base
feel it.
going up to a tiny top, that's a stable building, and you can build the tallest thing you can build before the advent of cement and rebar by building a pyramid.
Right.
Another thing I would add, and this is just me being facetious or devil's advocate, but that conversation of pyramids being built all over the world kind of runs hand in hand with why the Egyptians are building the pyramids. And then you can leap to why do you see pyramids all over the world? Well, the thing is, a lot of these pyramids, especially the ones let's say where a lot of them is in the Mesoamerican world. A great majority of those pyramids are actually tombs. They're places that people might live during their day, and then they're entombed inside of it. And there's thousands of people buried in pyramids all over. The vast majority of pyramids around the world, there are people buried in them. So it's just a funny thing. If we're gonna look to the other side of the world for an answer, Pakal's tomb is great. I mean, that's a pyramid that was only built to be a tomb for him.
I have a theory here in North America where, we have pyramids here too. We have, the famous ones are Cahokia and Poverty Point, but I think they start really, really early, like 6,000 BC, where we see hunter-gatherers living along the rivers of like
Maybe
Tennessee,
54.
Kentucky, and that area up into Ohio, and they're one of their big resources are these shells from the rivers. And they make these big shell mounds. They're all over here too. There's a bunch of shell mounds right here in St. Pete, aren't there? There was a time a couple thousand years ago where this shell, riverine, or ocean resources was a huge thing. So they built up these giant mounds.
So interesting.
And in Tennessee and Kentucky, they started just putting dead bodies in these shell mounds. And, maybe it was to keep the stink away. Maybe, maybe there were practical reasons. Maybe there were religious reasons. But the practice started long after the first shell mounds were happening. Like down here, you don't find any bodies in the shell mounds. But up there, they started doing it along the rivers. Then all of a sudden, that shell mound isn't a pile of dirt anymore. It's where Grandpa is. And then your ancestors get connected to that land. But then the Adena culture starts, like not that long after, maybe, 1,000 years, which is not much archaeologically. The Adena start building dirt mounds, and they put all of their burials in there. And they're building them out of dirt because they're in a different area that doesn't have all those shells. But maybe their cultural practice at that point was, that's where we put our dead. We put them in mounds. And since we don't have enough shells to make a mound here, we'll make it out of dirt. And this begins this tradition of burying people in mounds in North America, but the core of it was thousands of years ago, probably putting a stinky body under the shells where you can't smell it anymore.
Ancient landfills.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot of my theories revolve around that.
Yeah, ancient landfills.
Trash management is a very underappreciated aspect of human motivations. I think half the cities that were walked away from were probably mostly because they smelled like shit.
Yeah.
That would explain why they keep near the coast, right?
Like, it's a really dirty and disgusting topic, but
Yeah.
if you make a city of 20,000 people and you don't have plumbing, I mean, you can only dig so many holes before the place is literally a cesspool, and you have to move away for health and safety issues.
Yeah, there's a parallel topic to that sort of explains why we think that burial sites in Egypt become sacred sites. Egypt is one of the places where they think that the bubonic plague began, and living right along the river with you're in this high concentration of all these rats and snakes and rodents that are living around you, and they're living among your little house that's next to the river. It's the perfect place for diseases to begin. And so it's not that you have limited place to bury your dead, and because the vast majority of Egypt is wheat and barley fields, you don't really just want to throw Grandpa like out in the field, and you don't really want to bury him among this very scarce, precious land that you have. So what do? Well, this kind of gets off into another thing of the Egyptian psychology and their worldview, but
I don't know, I'm gonna try this for like 15 more minutes. I mean, I honestly think I could get 53 like this.
The ancient world were. They would acknowledge that
But
the
I
sun
might
was
be
born
wrong.
every day in the east, and it would die every day in the west. And so
I think I just need like a lot
they
of
believed
boosts.
that when they died, they should be buried in the west and facing east. That's how all tombs throughout Egypt are. They're always on the west side of the Nile, facing towards the
I can
morning
definitely get
sunrise, 'cause
53,
They thought
yeah.
that they would die in the west and then be reborn again in the east.
Oh, wow.
It'd be a great proof
So,
of
but this
concept if I can get
began,
53.
that early psychology was probably there. And
That's
they always
like
wanted
the
to be,
idea.
They always wanted to be buried on the west side. But originally what they do is they go out to the desert where the sand, where these big sand pits are, and they clear away the sand, and they, you bury Grandpa in there, and maybe you bury him with some of his crap that you don't really want. It's like, maybe Grandpa would have wanted that. I don't really have a use for this. I don't really have a use for this vase. I don't really have a use for this necklace. Like, this is nice, but I never really liked it. I'm just gonna bury it with him. And maybe there's some guys in town that are like, I would have liked to have that vase. Why don't we just go out there and take it? So, eventually somebody returns to go see his grandpa's grave, and it's been desecrated. And then you can see how the cycle of developing stigmas and superstitions about burials begins. Cursed tombs, and it becomes obsessive, right? And you can see this natural progression from sandpit burial to a sandpit burial being covered with stones, because they thought that would stop people from desecrating the tombs. And then it just continues and continues until you get to these rock-cut tombs that go into the ground. But that's not enough. They got to put a building on top of it. So we call that.
But
a
this is
mastaba.
54.
And then that mastaba eventually turns into 6 mastabas stacked on top of each other that makes this step pyramid, and then that can develop into a pyramid. And so it's this. There are these, essentially it's like a dump for their bodies that eventually becomes like the central point of their religion, right? So that's just
Probably
another
55 with that
example
line.
on the other side of the world of this same thing happening as the shell mounts.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense.
Pretty shit.
It's fascinating how humans, like, we all feel like we're from somewhere. Like, this is where we're born, but a lot of
54.
our identity and our connection to the land that we feel we're a part of is about dead bodies being buried
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of it is about death, right?
It's about
spend-
your ancestors and that case.
Death and
We
drugs.
hope that our ancestors went to that other place, whatever it is in our religious perspective. But then the place where they're dead becomes more than just your dead grandpa. It becomes like your connection point to your religion and what you think happens to you after death.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so fascinating because so necropolis is a Greek word, means dead city. So you have acropolis, a living city. You have this necropolis in Egypt called Saqqara. I'm sure you've heard of this before. And in Saqqara, you have these fake facades of buildings where the pharaoh is going to be walking around, where people are going to be living in this city in the afterlife. Like that's what all these tombs are. That's why at Giza.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they are. They're like buildings that people are going to continue to live in. They're going to get up in the next world and still be alive. And they're building, these giant graveyards. They're cities. You're walking through it, and all of these buildings that we call tombs. That's an oversimplification on our part, looking into the past.
Right.
This was a building where they would live eternally in the next life, and they built temples and places for the pharaoh to walk around. So on the third photo right there, those are facades of temples.
On the right, they're the third from the left.
Yes,
I mean?
yes. With some of these buildings, there's not actually an entrance into it. It's just a solid
It's like
building.
the Osirion,
Yeah.
where there's all these doorways that go nowhere.
Yes, it's thought that these are sacred places where the dead are going to continue to live in the afterlife. And it's just funny how they really, really care about building these cities where dead people are going to continue walking around. And what's so interesting is that the Maya put forth so much money from their economy to keep up their ancestors' necropoli, where their ancestors lived. Or
On a
where
very
they-
micro level, too.
Sure,
Every
sure.
family had a little family shrine. If they owned that piece of property through generations, one of the buildings was where Grandpa was buried, and it becomes a living shrine in their house.
Yeah, it's like an entire part of their city that is just dedicated.
Is that one of those mastabas in the background? Is that on the bottom right?
So that the
bottom left. I'm sorry.
bottom left.
That pyramid in the background. That's the one that Emotep made, right?
Okay, I'm sorry, not this one. Will you go back to the other
Yeah,
photo?
the bottom left.
Bottom left, that's on there.
Like that.
Yeah, so at the top right, those are actually modern day rafters that are covering up the top 2 or 3 layers. That's the step pyramid of Saqqara.
Okay.
Are they
so-
like?
And
are they rebuilding it?
is that a pyramid or is that the mastaba thing?
So they think that is the first pyramid, in order. Where you can see that if you look up the word mastaba, the idea is that, we know that people from 3100 BC to 2700 BC, very important people such as pharaohs, are being buried in these buildings that, these 1x3 buildings that look like big stone Twinkies. That's basically what they are. And the reason that they evolved from there is because they're burying the person in these shafts that go under the ground. And what tomb robbers do is, rather than coring up, just like this. So what tomb robbers do, rather than coring all those blocks to get to that hole that leads to that tomb, what they do instead is they go, okay, we're just going to dig a parallel hole in the ground and find our way to that tomb and rob all the goods that are from it. So they think that the way that the first pyramid was developed was that they had these shafts, these burial shafts under the ground that basically recreate the pharaoh's apartment that he would have had in Memphis. They're all, they're decorated in all kinds of different ways. There's hieroglyphs down there and everything. And they eventually started out as this 1x3 structure, and then they expand it to being basically a large 1x1 structure, or let's say like a 10x10 structure in comparison. It's huge. To be so big that people can't tunnel underneath it and get to the chambers under there. The way that we know they did that was, I was standing next to this pyramid looking at where the casing stones have fallen off, and you can see the original casing stones from the smaller building that's in there. So you can look at it with your own eyes and go, oh, they turned this building into this building and then added 5 more on top to make it this grand structure that arcs up into the sky.
Right.
So that's the idea. And then all these other pharaohs and, you know, high-ranking government people build their tombs and their little temples for the afterlife around it. And what they're building is a city that they're going to live in the next life.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you seen those giant? There's I think it's in some of this same pyramid near Saqqara, where there's these I think they're step pyramids, where they have these like coming out of the pyramids. There's these kind of like canals they cut out of the stone that go to these giant dishes. There's like these big stone like bowls that have these,
very weird.
and there's these like channels cut out of the rock that go into the pyramid, as if there was like something that's supposed to flow out of the pyramid and go into these bowls.
Yeah, Abu Sir is a great example of this. I honestly, I couldn't tell you. I know that Jeffrey Drum. No, yeah.
Definitely not that.
No, it's these huge bowls. You know, it's so specific that you may not be able to find it on Google
If you
Images.
type in like probably land of Chem bowls.
There's probably like some archaeological term. that
Sure.
they call it.
Yeah. And this isn't my area of expertise, but it is something that's very peculiar. You have these little channels that run along the foundation of a lot of these sites, and they lead to these little. They're almost like, I mean, I can't see them being anything other than collection bowls. It's very, very strange. But I honestly couldn't tell you.
Not
what they
in,
are.
huh?
Yeah, they lead out.
They lead out like they're like they
the
it goes
pitch.
down. The pitch is down. Yeah, it's super strange. And then that's he ties that in with like the smell. There's it's a what is the smell? Sulfur.
Sulfur, ammonia.
Ammonia. Yeah. Like the higher you go into the pyramids, the more it reeks of ammonia.
It's either from something that was used inside those chambers, or people just peeing in them. It was one of the two. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just making a joke.
Some people think it was like bat shit or something.
Yeah.
Guano.
I don't know. I was in places where there was a lot of that.
Cat piss smells like ammonia.
Yeah. I was in places where there was a lot of bats and it didn't smell like that.
There it is.
Yeah.
Please make this be the run. Make it be the run.
Yeah. So when going back to the Americas, what evidence do we have?
Oh, why would I get stuck on there? Like
drugs
what?
in these cultures? And
Such a
drug use,
scam.
what types of drugs were they using, and when did they start using them?
You know, the Mesoamerica, we do not have a whole lot of evidence beyond tobacco. There's thoughts that maybe mushrooms were involved, but no real proof. You know, the entire
Peyote
argument
brother.
is founded around a couple of mushroom stone statues.
Mushrooms and
which really
peyote,
isn't
brother.
Enough. But South America, they were using ayahuasca.
Oh, I don't
using,
think it was 53 if that's
San
stuck.
Pedro cactus, and there's a couple of other stray things that are involved in drug use, but they're like to prepare the body, like to purge the body so that it can.
That might have been my
receive the
fastest
hallucinogenic
one.
stuff in a pure way, like even manioc is said to be that. You know, manioc, we make tapioca pudding out of it, but it's poison. And it'll poison you in its original form. So they think they were using manioc to just throw up and then take San Pedro or ayahuasca.
Is there any connection with
De Toro too.
Is there any connection with drug use and religion?
I guess up in northern Mexico, we have the Huichol people who hunt the peyote. And that seems to be a very, very old tradition. Now those poor guys are cordoned off to a little section of mountains in the mainland right across from the Baja Peninsula. But they'd have this traditional, they do it to this day, where they go out into the desert on this kind of like almost like Australian Aboriginal spirit walk. They go out there and they go to a place that's supposed to be the mountain of creation, and there they hunt peyote like they're hunting deer, and they like shoot it with little arrows. But then they take the peyote and they see recreations of their creation story and bond, and then they walk back across the desert. So those guys are still doing that, and there are caves on the border of Texas and Mexico the lower Pecos. There's especially one called White Shaman Cave. Oh, are you ready? White Shaman Cave. Where we can see that same story being played out. People like hunting little buttons on the ground and the big mountain. And people obviously, well, they're like turning into ghosts. You see the top one from the third from the top?
Right there.
That's like, people interpret that as like that person's spirit coming out of them in trance. And this is a big, wide panel. White Shaman Cave is absolutely amazing. It's a wonderful thing to see. But this woman named Carolyn Boyd has really gone to great length to see all the elements of this panel, which is like 6,000 years old, and pretty much nailed what the Huichol are still doing there. In fact, a few years back, she invited a Huichol group out to look at it and talk to them about it, and they just like burst into tears when they saw the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add and say, if I'm reaching out there a little bit or speculating, or if I have a gut feeling, I think it was really interesting. I don't know, maybe it was Paul Rosley on your podcast where he was talking about his ayahuasca experience in the Amazon, and he was saying that he felt like he shrunk down to this molecular level, and he was like floating through the Amazon as like an atom, and then eventually he kind of moved on to another chapter, and he became a jaguar and started seeing the Amazon through the eyes of a jaguar. Do you recall him telling this story?
I remember Mike Corey telling a story about doing ayahuasca. I think it was I think it was actually in a Mayan village.
Sure. And it's so popular these days.
Sure. But no,
I think that was Mike, Amazon.
I think that was Mike Corey who told that story, and he explained it as like a human body being ripped open, like everything pulled open of the human body, and it was like ripping open every fiber of the universe or something like that. And like he was like being like shot through the universe.
Sure. I don't want to be ripped open.
Oh no, that was it.
Like he was like
That was the run.
Yeah,
No boost, so.
It's pretty common for
38,
people,
yeah, maybe, I
if
don't
you
know.
read experiences like just on Reddit, or there are people who put together these collections of people recording their experiences on ayahuasca. And something that's pretty common is people seeing a jaguar, if they're doing it down in the Amazon, or being able to see through the eyes of a jaguar. And I just always wonder if that has something to do or not with your idea of this fanged deity in the Amazon.
That was like perfect.
I think he is definitely involved in the traditions of ayahuasca and San Pedro. I mean, sometimes there's uprooted San Pedro floating in the background of scenes with this guy. So, but I did want to point out too that hallucinogenic drugs are not the only way that Native Americans found a way to hallucinate and be that other world.
Starving can make you hallucinate.
Starving, the vision quests that were done by the Indians of the plains, those didn't involve drugs at all. That was exhaustion, starvation, and it would trigger it. For the Maya, what they would do is they would again starve, keep themselves in
Nice stairs.
darkness, kind of sensory deprivation.
I don't think it's just 53.
And then they cut
I think
themselves.
it's 54.
And that sudden loss of blood is what would trigger the vision. Whoa. So a really bad cut when you are starved and exhausted is the trigger point. The Native Americans in the plains, they kind of ran around. They didn't know when it was going to happen to them. They had to hit their threshold.
That's so
But the
fascinating.
Maya kind of honed it where they'd get themselves prepped, and then a quick and intense blood loss would trigger the vision.
Because that's so interesting, because when you do, I've never done ayahuasca, but I've done DMT, and when you do DMT, it's almost like it's experiencing death in a way, where your soul kind of like leaves your body and you leave like the material world behind.
That's their interpretation,
So
that they are entering the world where the dead reside.
Like they want to, and I'm not talking about like, are you talking about sacrificing?
No.
Okay,
I'm
you're
talking about
getting
like
high.
getting to the edge.
Right, getting to the edge, right. Like getting to the edge of death, but not going all the way.
Hallucinogens, in a way, are poisoning us. The hallucinations are our body fighting off what it thinks is something trying to kill it.
Right. What sort of, so they would starve themselves and then cut themselves so they would bleed out, almost bleed out fully, and then they would experience these things? And were there any rituals involved in it? Was this like a ritual?
Oh yeah,
thing?
I mean this was a king thing. The kings would cut their penises and then dance around with paper tied to it, and the blood would splatter everywhere. People would see that. Then they'd put that paper in a bowl and burn it, and that blood.
This guy sucks, man. He's fat.
Year,
This is a
and
great-
he would
yeah.
and he would be taught music and astronomy and science, and you know you build this into a very well-rounded person, and you know maybe say he's 18 years old, he probably gets, you know, maybe I'm just kind of spitballing, but I'm
Right.
just saying, you know, maybe he gets, you know, the girls, whatever girls he wants.
No, he did.
You know,
He had that whole.
yeah. So you know, he gets everything that he wants. He gets all the food that he wants, but 365 days he will be sacrificed. And it's basically like fattening the pig, right, for slaughter.
And he has to walk up, no crying, no getting dragged up there. You get chosen as a young man,
And they know
and
the child
given
knows about it from
every
the beginning.
benefit in life, and trained so where this is a person who is trained for leading us all. But then they walk up. This is an Aztec tradition where that person walks up and willingly sacrifices himself for the community.
Self-sacrifice.
Well, you know, they kill him, but he doesn't get dragged to the stone. He walks up and lays down on it.
Will you go into gory detail about how they killed him?
Can you do that? how specifically?
Heart extraction is what
That
they
was-
love to
that-
do.
they love to do it.
and they have these.
Is that the only way?
There was head chopping off too, but the Aztecs
quicker.
loved. The Maya actually didn't do this heart extraction thing as much until they got more influenced by the people of central Mexico.
Okay.
It's the classic period. You really can't find much in the way of Maya.
Yeah, DC, it's doing great, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yep. Some changes have been made, and it's like, it's cruising, dude. I just got my new shoe that came out called the Ascend, and I swear to God, it's my favorite pro shoe. One of my pro shoes is my favorite one.
Well, we just talking about, like, I mean, the amount of pro shoes that we have. 13 to 15, something like that, colorways is just, it's crazy. Would you design each and every one of them? Would you have your input in on them? Or would sometimes they would just be like, hey, here's a shoe, we think that this would be good for you?
In the earlier days, I was way more involved.
Okay.
Mainly just from the aesthetic. And then, as different designers were coming in and doing their thing, like they kind of get tasked with that, and then they'll ask a gang of questions like, "Hey, what do you think? What kind of materials you want to use? What do you want to look? What do you want it to look like? Da da da." And then it's kind of a back and forth type thing, but I'm not with a pen and paper.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. What about when you did your Kalis 1? It has a toe cap on it. Was that just because the Lynx had the toe cap? You wanted to put that in something newer with your name on it? What was that like?
Dude, the Kalis one, I actually drew the links with just the tiniest bit of change and was like, this is what I want. And Derek was like, dude, there's already a lynx. You can't have a lynx. And I'm like, yeah, but everyone thinks the lynx my shoe anyway.
All right, we are back, huh? We're back at the 9 Club, everybody. Today we have a very special.
Yeah.
Special guest, Mr. Josh Kalis is with us. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are very good. Glad that you're here.
My heart is warm. I'm having heart palpitations, actually. Having Josh Kalis sitting right here in front of me.
Yeah, I'm all bundled up. I just came fresh off the plane from Michigan.
How was the weather?
Thanks for
over there?
joining us.
Actually, you know what? We've had a great fall, like a nice warm fall.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No snow or anything? What's
Not
going
yet.
on over there? Yeah, you got a frost going on there? I
We'll
don't
get
know
frost in the morning, yeah.
about- Oh, yeah.
But usually October starts getting cold and wet. In November, it could definitely snow.
Okay.
But man, it was like 70 degrees.
Ooh. So, like, when it snows, do you take it to go out and, like, build a snowman and, like, do all that fun stuff?
Sometimes when my kids were younger, we used to go.
Oh, no, I was just meant, like, by yourself.
Sometimes.
Okay. That's what I would do. I've
Like
never.
to reminisce, you know?
Yeah. Charcoal, carrot.
Yeah, but it all
Scarf.
depends on the snow because sometimes you don't get the sticky snow, and sometimes it's too sticky and it picks up all the leaves.
Oh, really? You have a dirty snow.
Yeah, it can get really rough. Yeah, because we don't clean up all our leaves in the fall because we like the leaves to go back into the soil. Makes the soil.
It's a something.
Replenish?
Rejuvenates it.
There it
or
is.
something. I don't know. How does it feel being back in Michigan? Like after, I mean, you've traveled the world. You went from Michigan to all these different places and lived a bunch of different places. How does it feel to be back now?
I love it. To me, it's the greatest place there is, really.
Yeah.
I kind of treat it as a suburb to Philadelphia and Chicago and New York.
How far is it from each one of those?
Well, normally I would drive to Chicago, which is about 2.5 hours. If you fly, it's like 20 minutes. Flying to Philly is like an hour and 10 minutes, and New York is like an hour and 15 minutes.
Not bad. But you said you can drive around. I mean, 2 hours is not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, what? How to drive to Philly? What's that? 4 hours maybe?
From Michigan?
Yeah.
12.
Oh, 12.
Yeah.
Oh, you said it was like an hour flight.
Yeah, it's like an hour and 10 minute flight, yeah.
You're not
Because
good at
when you're driving there, you got to go down and you go through Ohio and Pittsburgh. But when you fly, you just fly right over the lakes.
Oh, the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Michigan, it's just good to be. I mean, you got your family there. You're raising a family and all that stuff, right? So
Yeah, family's kind of raised already.
Okay.
But yeah.
How old are your kids?
Yeah.
Jalen is 25 and Kaz is 13.
Are you serious? Wait, I feel like just yesterday I'm watching in the little car in the cul-de-sac doing donuts and stuff. Like we're already 13 years into
she's
this.
13, yeah.
Is she still driving cars and doing stuff, or?
She's got a little dirt bike and actually she had a mini side-by-side that we just got rid of because she outgrew it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she still drives from time to time. It's not really her thing, and plus she's in the age of being so social, and yeah, she was never really actually into driving. She was just super good, like ridiculously naturally talented.
Even the side-by-side, that's off-road.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
rode with Letitia Buffoni in one of those. She scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I almost wet myself.
Yeah, that's cool.
Nuts.
Yeah, and then all those viral videos and stuff, it got kind of crazy with like Ellen DeGeneres reaching out and America's Got Talent reaching out.
Really?
Dude, even we came across a Joe Biden presidential campaign that had her clipping.
What? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and we definitely try to get paid for that.
As you should.
Yeah, and so we sent a cease and desist, but also a bill. And they didn't pay the bill.
They didn't pay the bill?
Nah, but they took the bill. But I mean, that's something cool. Presidential campaign. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even realize that all these people were reaching out. That's crazy.
Yeah, she's made quite a lot of money actually,
Okay.
because we would license some of her videos out to like the NAACP or Chase Bank. Yeah. So they would pay to use these clips.
So she's got a nice little nest egg
She
going
does,
on right
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Oh. How much we talking about? Are we going to college? Is she going to college off of this?
Well,
Or we-
the
What
most
the
she
fuck?
made, she did a.
Is that a bad cutscene? It
commercial
must have
for,
been.
You ever heard of Renault? You've heard of Renault? It's like Mercedes, but it's just North America they don't sell cars.
Okay.
And they flew her out to Montreal, and they wanted to make a small copy of that car, and they couldn't figure it out. So my buddy who built her cars, because we would cut out power wheels and make full chassis and all that stuff for her cars.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
Like her little car went 30 miles an hour.
Seriously.
So Renault made the body, sent us the body, and my buddy built out the whole chassis, and then flew her to Montreal, and she did a full $1 million commercial.
We were just looking at really.
Yeah.
Like, this is what it is here. Like,
Yeah.
this is a little article. 6 years old, known for being an expert driver for electric toy Ferrari car. Her dad, pro street skateboarder, John. set up an Instagram account for her. Who was getting a large phone. It's amazing. I mean, I used to watch her do donuts and stuff. It's cool. I like that you guys made a little career out of it, or a little nest egg.
Yeah, but because she wasn't necessarily into it, I never tried to pressure her into doing it. And eventually, she grew out of those little cars, and we would have fun driving the bigger stuff. But it was something that I just never really. I'm not gonna. Yeah, she can do what she wants. Yeah. And still to this day, if she wants to go drive, we'll go drive. But if she doesn't,
It's amazing.
yeah.
Look at that. It's cool.
Yeah.
So are you living close to where you grew up?
I live in the suburbs of where I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah. And growing up there, I actually didn't like it very much. I thought it was like a really small town, maybe kind of boring. So my mom lived in New York City, and I don't know, maybe when I was like 12 or 13, I started going to visit her in New York, and I kind of had free reign. She would just let me go do my thing, and me and my buddy from down the street would just hop on the L train, and I swear I thought we were going all over New York City, but probably we were just in Queens.
Okay. You didn't have the patience to take a trip all the way up.
Were you skating at this point?
Yeah, I had just started skating, and I remember like seeing some big quarter pipe in the back of like a grocery store complex, or a mini ramp in this kid's backyard in Brooklyn. Like little things that we would go check out from time to time, because I would stay with her in the summer. And just recently I was talking to Jeff Pang, and he put a picture up of something. I was like, hey, I remember that, and he was like, what? You were here back then? I'm like, yeah, remember that quarter pipe? And
Really?
yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wow.
So when I would come back from New York and I'd be in Michigan, I had really strict rules here. And my dad hated skateboarding, so
Oh, really?
yeah. So I'd always have to sneak out and sneak around and hop on the bus, and it was such a difference between New York and Michigan. Michigan was like boring.
So that's why you did it. Yeah, too many rules.
With the back
Slow.
boost,
New York,
the
you were-
forward
you had free
boost,
reign.
and the back
Brooklyn.
boost.
Why didn't your dad?
Queens.
Queens, yeah.
Why didn't your dad like skateboarding?
I don't know, to be honest. I think he thought it was like too punk rock, druggish, not controllable, maybe.
Yeah.
And back then too, it was kind of an unknown, right? it's like a punk thing.
Yeah.
How did he feel about it after the fact when you started getting recognized for your skateboarding and actually started making some money?
Well, that was a long time. Like, we had been through so much. These headphones are kind of cool.
You're good.
Anxiety's the anxiety's kicking. It's not just y'all.
The skating going back and forth from New York to Michigan, they kind of just starting to skate from there. Figuring, you said you would go back home, you'd sneak out. How do you? That seems like a very tough thing to do when you're a kid, to sneak out all the time, do something that you love, and come back.
Yeah, dude. It was growing up in Michigan with my dad as a skateboarder was gnarly. Yeah, he was super anti it, and he was so anti it that he had a baseball card collection, and I would steal some cards and take them to like a baseball card shop and sell them.
Really? Like good ones?
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Like the illest one was this like Al Kaline rookie card, or Mickey Mantle card, or Jackie Robinson, or whatever. I mean, that's the only way I could get skateboarders.
How much were you getting?
I don't remember enough to buy a couple of them.
Damn.
Yeah, it wasn't like hundreds of dollars.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
maybe like $100 or $200. But I probably didn't know the real value of the cards.
Little kid coming in there. He's got bucks, kid.
He's
We'll
like,
take, we'll take this Mickey Mantle card off your hands.
Yeah, well, I would go straight to the skate shop by me. It was called Wind Waves and Wheels. And I go there and I buy whatever, usually a world board.
Okay.
I think those were my favorite back then, or an H Street board maybe. And yeah, and then I would hide the board so he couldn't see it.
Seriously, it was that rough.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I would like I only knew one skater from my middle school, so I would in the morning I would throw my board out the window, and then when I would leave to go to school, I'd pick my board back up and shuffle down the street and then skate.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you probably did most of your skating in New York, I would assume.
No.
No?
I definitely did most of my skating in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you actually move out of there? You moved directly. You moved to New York.
No.
Where'd you move to?
No, I moved out of Grand Rapids. I moved to Dallas.
Dallas.
Yeah.
Oh, wasn't your dad moved to Dallas?
Yeah, he got a
Okay.
job transfer, and that was actually the first time I went to.
Oh no,
Because
that was it.
him and his wife
Oh, that could have been it. That might have been it.
fuck up their room somehow, I guess.
Damn it.
But he told me. So they sent me to Woodward.
Woodward, PA.
Yeah. I actually went to my mom's, who by that time moved from New York to a suburb of Philadelphia. And then I think she drove me to Woodward. I don't even remember how that happened, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, though. Woodward, PA.
Yeah. And I was at Woodward for a week while my dad did the move down to Texas. And I swear when I was at Woodward, I think like Vinnie Ponte was there and Jeff Pang were there and like, Tim O'Connor maybe. I might be like confusing a couple different Woodwards. Oh, dude. I forgot about this. So in Grand Rapids, I sent a sponsor me tape to excuse me, to a company called Renegade.
I've heard of Renegade, yeah.
It was Kevin Staub.
Okay.
And he actually, dude, handwritten shit. And I'm talking like curbs, like parking lot skating or whatever. Doing, I don't even remember what it was. And he was like, yeah, I would love to send you boards. So he actually sent me some Renegade boards. And they were so big that the boards that I was buying from Lim Waves and Reels, using that money from stealing the cards, I would trace out. And my dad had a wood shop, and I would go down and jigsaw out the shape. And that's what I skated. Yeah, I would skate.
The Renegade boards, you modified.
Yeah.
Right.
So the first time I went to Woodward, that's what I skated was modified Renegade boards, or maybe they were Shine boards because Renegade switched from was it Shine?
Shine was a couple of
Yeah. Well, before Shine it was Renegade.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember the Woodward kids were like clowning me for that because I didn't have sanded down edges.
Sharp ass edges.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't remember. I've been to Woodward a couple times.
Okay.
And
I was gonna say, didn't you get hooked up by like H Street or something when you went to Woodward one time?
yeah, I don't.
Was that later?
No, that had to be that trip.
Really?
Yeah, it had to be that trip. Actually, yeah, I'd only been to Woodward as a camper. It had to be once, I guess. Unless I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I met some of those H Street guys there. Like, dude, there was so much moving around between Michigan, New York, and Pennsylvania, and Texas. I probably have like dates
I mean, yeah.
messed up, but yeah, I was a huge fan of H Street.
H Street. what
Yeah,
is it?
that's a Shine board. That red one. Yeah. Mhm.
Damn, that's Woodward back then. That's crazy.
Yeah. That's Dallas.
What?
Yeah.
Damn, dude.
Footage is insane. I mean, how old were you at this point? Kids at late show.
I don't know.
15? Yeah.
Something.
Okay. Those pants are those sweat pants.
I mean, you could probably date it just by the wardrobe.
Wait, was there a point when your dad though, like, your dad came okay with it?
No.
Look, so the whole time you're doing this, he's not.
Oh, it got worse.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. I got disowned from like grandpa. Like, hey, you can't come Thanksgiving anymore.
What?
Yeah, it had a lot to do with not just me being a skater. Although they would be like, my grandpa told me one time. He says, "Hey, a baseball player takes his jersey, his baseball outfit off when he's not playing baseball." And I was like, "What the fuck you mean by that?" Like, oh, because I dress as a skater. And yeah, I mean, we wore some like pretty ridiculous stuff, and we would cut our hairs and bleach them.
Right.
But there was a time where I wasn't in school anymore, and that was after Dallas, or sometime in Dallas. Like,
I might play for 10 more minutes this level,
I mean, we didn't get to win. And
maybe less.
I'm trying to remember. I spent a lot of time in the city of Dallas. And we lived in Rockwall, Texas, which was like north of Dallas. And the high school I went to, oh man, I'm trying to remember. They had this football team that was like, dude, so Texan. And I was hanging out with like the hoods in Dallas.
Really?
And I would come back to Rockwall to go to school. And I remember one time I was walking in the courtyard at lunch, and the football team just came right up to me and like started talking shit. And so I started talking shit about their big belt buckles. And next thing you know, I felt threatened, so I punched this dude as hard as I could, and he didn't even flinch, dude. He was like, he took that punch like
Like a fly.
and then he just looked at me, and I'm like, oh my God. And next thing I knew, I was on my back, and my CD player and batteries and everything went everywhere. And I looked up, and it was like the whole football team was like, they're about to beat my ass, dude. And I'm still trying to talk shit. And they didn't beat my ass. Like, they were like, it's not worth it, Robbie. I'll never forget that. It ain't worth it, Robbie. It ain't worth it. So I picked all my shit up and walked back through the courtyard. And when I got to the top of the 4 stairs to get back into school, I got pantsed.
Oh,
Yeah, I was wearing like fuck shorts or whatnot.
yeah.
And somebody pants me, balls out, everything.
God, dude.
Got
And
all
I
the
just-
boxers
I
too.
just lifted my shirt up and was like, that's what y'all want to see? That's what y'all want to see? Pulled my shit back up and went to school. And what's funny is like they never fucked with me after that. Ever.
Robbie and the football team.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, I did like a day or two later, like my Dallas homie showed up with lowriders and picked me up from school and kind of flexed on everybody a little bit. I don't know if that really had anything to do with it, but honestly, I didn't have many problems in that anymore, but I really didn't like being there.
Was there other skaters at the school? Or were you,
No.
you were the only skater?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
But I started spending more time down in Dallas. And I think, if I remember right, my dad and his wife went on some trip or something like that. So we had a couple of us stayed at his house. No parties or nothing. But when they got home, they saw the cigarette butts outside, and his wife went bananas on me, dude. Like, grabbed me, ripped my shirt, ripped my herringbone chain. Then my dad came and started trying to fight me, and they were saying like they thought I threw parties in the house and all this stuff, and which I didn't. Like, we would party down in Dallas. Rockwall was like kind of like a get away from it though.
Okay.
And sometime after that, man, it's kind of blurry, but I think I got caught stealing. Because what we would do is we'd go into like a Marshalls or something that had the Pumas.
Okay. Yeah.
And they just had this little like plastic thing that held the Pumas together, and we would bring nail clippers and clip them out, and then put the Pumas on our feet and put our old shoes on the back on the rack and just walk out.
Right. Okay.
But I forgot the fingernail clippers, so we stopped at the grocery store to grab fingernail clippers. And I put them in my jacket, we walked out, and I straight got tackled.
Wow.
Yeah, I got tackled by the security guard over fingernail clippers.
Oh, this is for the. Not, you didn't even got to the shoes yet.
I hadn't
This
even
is
got to the
fingernail.
shoes.
This is the
Yeah.
probably 85-cent nail clippers.
Yeah, but we didn't have
Okay. Fair enough.
So anyway, they take me and my boy upstairs, and I thought it was such a big deal for fingernail clippers, but anyway, come to find out, I had been reported as a runaway by my dad.
Really?
Yeah, which it was like a weekend. I was just down on the weekend, so I don't know what that was about.
Crazy.
But anyway, so I went to jail. I went to juvie for a few days. It was pretty entertaining. It was like mad gangsters in there throwing up gang signs, and what you in here for? And I'd be like, I stole fingernail clippers. And they were like, what? Yeah. Like, it was actually kind of funny. It kind of saved me a little bit because, like, everyone thought it was so ridiculous. Maybe they thought I was bullshitting.
Right.
But anyway, my dad actually came and got me out of that. And I asked him, why didn't you just get me out the night I got in there? And he's like, I need to, teach me a lesson and this, that. And
Okay.
so that kind of drove even more of a separation between us. And I can't remember, I don't remember how, like, this bounty hunter guy, there was a time where I got locked up again for something. Like, I would get locked up in jail all the time, like, my whole life, dude. Really? Yeah, nonstop going to jail. And it was only for, like, overnights or charges would get dismissed or you wouldn't even get charged with anything. But like, if I got in an argument with a guy outside of a store because, like, he thought I cut in line or I would cut in line, or it would just escalate into, like, fuck you, here come the cop, and I would go to jail. I go to jail every single time for anything. Michigan, Texas, Philly, San Francisco. Like, anyway. And I'm not even bullshitting. Mikey thought I was probably bullshitting about some of this, but I brought him down to Dallas recently and introduced him to a couple of my homies back then. Some of the ones that are left. Everyone else is dead or locked up or whatever. But yeah, like, am I bullshitting? I'm not bullshitting. Like, yeah, I don't know why it would jail. They'd always take me to jail, but I never got, like, convicted or anything.
Okay. What was your longest stint you did in there?
Like, real jail or juvie? Few days.
Okay.
Yeah, few days.
Huh.
But anyway, so I'm in jail, and this blonde-haired, he was straight albino, like red eyes and all that. Yeah, he came and got me and took me to what I later found out was actually a crisis prevention center. I always thought it was like some mental institution.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did 3 months in Houston, and they transferred me to Salt Lake City, Utah. And then, yeah, it was nuts, dude. Like, no idea what I was doing. No idea. And, like, getting injected with Thorazine and being around, like, people that are, like, really fucked up.
Jeez.
And, yeah, I would have no idea. I thought maybe it was for whatever I was in jail for that time, which could have been an argument or it could have been, like, stealing fingernail clippers.
They never told you, like, oh, we're taking you here because of this.
They told me that it was the state of Texas.
Huh.
Yeah, the state of Texas put me in. And I, like, driving to the place from Dallas to Houston, I mean, the guy, like, pulled his gun out and told me, state of Texas tells me I can do whatever I can do to, for you not to run, so don't run, and had me take all these psych exams. It was really bizarre. Yeah. And I know it sounds vague, like the way I'm talking about it, but to be honest, it was very vague. So anyway, yeah, one day that guy showed up after the transfer from Houston to Salt Lake City, and he was like, "You're going home." Yeah, and he told me that it was my dad who put me in there, and it was his insurance company that was paying for it. But I had snuck a phone call in to my mom, and somehow she, like, got a hold of somebody to figure out what this was all about. And I think it was literally my dad being like, fuck you. Like, I don't want to deal with this kid.
Send him away.
Yeah, whatever it was. And it was like a 9-year program.
God damn.
Yeah, it was like, or maybe it was 6 year. I think it was 3-year in the facility. Yeah, 6 year. 3-year in the facility, and then like a 3-year independent living or something like that. Yeah. I don't know exactly what it is still, because whenever I bring it up to my dad, because me and my dad have a great relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll bring it up. I'll be like, "What was that place?" He'd be like, "I could have got you out here." I'm like, no. Like, for real, what was it? He's like, "Well, what do you mean? You only were in there for like 3 weeks?" And I'm like, "What? No. Let me verify that." So I would hit up my boys and be like, "Man, am I tripping? Was I in there for 3 weeks?" And they were like, "Nah, dude, you were in there for like almost a year." Yeah. It was like 6 months. So anyway, when I got out of that, I looked at it like being around
Sorry,
my
I'm
dad
done.
and living with him and his wife was
I'm
just
done.
absolutely pointless.
Right.
And by that time,
I'm not gonna go for the 53.
from Queens, New York to
I'm not gonna
suburbs.
do it.
And I remember I had visited her at some point prior to all this. Oh, probably when right before I
It was a
went.
valiant effort.
Okay.
Maybe that's what it was. And I met some skaters out there around her way. She lived in Levittown, Pennsylvania, which is Bucks County. And I met these kids, and I was like, man, let's go downtown Philadelphia. And after they made fun of the way I say downtown, like some Michigan accent, they clown on me. We went downtown Philly.
Okay.
And we skated Love Park before Love Park was even. I think there was one dude maybe like rolling around.
Okay.
There was you didn't even notice that there were ledges up top because the bushes were covering the ledges, but that's where we skated because the 3 stairs that went around the fountain were like super smooth, and that was super fun.
Thank you
skating
for being here.
And I couldn't tell you what year that was. Maybe like, if I were to guess, 92, 93. I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out there. But anyway, going back to Dallas, I told my dad, I was like, I'm going to stay at
6
my mom's.
years. Wow. Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
I've never, outside of living with my mom for a certain amount of time during the summers, you know, my mom and dad split up when I was 2, so I hadn't really spent a whole type of livable time with my mom. So I went out there to do that, and that didn't last very long either. And like, yeah, that didn't last very long either, because now all I want to do is go down to Philly. And that's when I really, like, very first started meeting, like, all the Love kids, like, the early Love kids.
But they weren't there at Love Park, were they?
Well, by this time,
They.
yeah, by this time there was, like, skaters.
There. Okay.
Yeah. And the main skaters were Ricky Oyola, Matt Reason, Sergey Trudowski, and then, like, a whole slew of others. And I love that because, like, I loved it so much that I was enrolled in school up at my mom's house, but I barely went. And I just wanted to be in Philly, and it reminded me so much of, like, the type of skateboarding that I loved watching when I was growing up, which was all the E&B stuff.
I was gonna say, yeah.
And knowing that I could never be a part of E&B, and not even really wanting to be a part of it because it wasn't my scene. But just loving how it looked on film, and the little clips from, like, Quiet Story. You know that video?
Yeah. I don't actually know Quiet Story.
What was that? Like, it was kind of like a 411 before 411.
Okay.
And there was just like this, like, maybe 30-second clip at E&B, the first time I ever saw it, and it was like Carroll 360 flips the 7, and Henry Sanchez big spins the 7, and, like, I think, like, Wade Spares, like, doing a little flacker. I don't know, but there was people everywhere sitting on the ledges, and ever since I saw that, I was like, holy shit, that's, yeah, all I did was, like, follow anything E&B, any magazines, any videos.